Alright, we're back with more NFL coverage, and in this one, I'll be covering the divisional round action. And man, you have some varying emotions for a lot of the different fan bases that engaged in this particular week of ball, man. As I'm saying, you're just seeing on a week to week basis as we go further and further into the playoffs just how deep and unpredictable this shit can truly be. And it makes things very captivating. I'm sure we'll find that out whenever they come up with numbers on viewership and things like that, because all of these games in their own respective ways provide a ton of intrigue and just like there are so many different ways you could go about putting it. But it is all, at the end of the day, a really good match to tune into. Every single one of them, no matter how you slice it. Because on any given Sunday, any team can triumph over another. That's the beauty of this sport. And that unpredictable nature can be a good thing in some regards. For other teams, on the other hand, maybe not so much. But those are the kinds of dynamics that exist in postseason football, where you have to continuously win or you're being sent home after just one particular game. Could come down to a play, could come down to a string of plays, could come down to specific players converting on said opportunities or not. Nonetheless, 4 teams after this week would claim their right to championship spots for their respective conferences. And you would get a wild 4, showing you even more just how the tides can really turn for specific franchises. But to get straight into it, and to start off with this Bills-Broncos game, coming into this game specifically at this time of year, the thing that was on everybody's mind was what happened in last year's game. The Broncos, they were a younger team at that point, and Bo Nix was a old rookie as he might have been. He was still inexperienced at the time, and the Bills, despite having pretty much the same team at this point, they beat the shit out of them. Won that game 31-7 in their house, and then advanced to the divisional round last year from there. Now, again, these teams have taken completely different courses over the last year. The Broncos have succeeded in one-score games all season long. They came into this with an 11-2 overall record, which was one of the best marks in NFL history to this point. And Bo Nix also accounted for 7 game-winning drives, pretty much. So this was definitely going to come down to the clutch. You had to understand that. Same thing from Josh Allen's perspective. Like, he had about, I think, 18 fourth-quarter touchdowns they mentioned throughout the course of the season. And a lot of them, again, with this team having to consistently climb back and somehow finding a way to win in the second half, they also have their own experience with being able to weather the storm and come out on top. Defensively, the Broncos had leveled up even from last year's standards, as they came into this game as one of the top defensive units in the league overall, accounting for one of the highest total sacks in a single season since the 1984 Bears. And also, despite that going down, not even really having a lot of takeaways, which would be crucial to understand just how this game went. They only had 14 in the regular season, one of the lowest marks across any defense in the National Football League this year. Penalties were also a struggle for them throughout the season, but you couldn't deny that at all 3 levels, they had undeniable strengths. Talanoa Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw helped a lot of that out. And they proved to be great additions when they were both on the field this season. So any number of things can happen from the Broncos' perspective, despite whatever it is you might have wanted to say about Bo Nix entering this. For Josh Allen, in ways the team was pretty much the same, but they kind of took steps back. There have been points in the season where the offense had just been cardiac. I mean, hell, I think one of the best examples is whatever the hell was going down against the Texans on that Thursday night football game. They gotten off to a decent start in the year, but after that game, and also taking into account what the Eagles were able to do to them defensively, they've had some rough streaks over the past half of the season. Not to mention defensively, they have also just taken a complete and total step back. Now, one of those things could come down to the fact that Ed Oliver Jr. was out for all this time, and he would return to start out the game, but they'd need a much better effort from all of their 11 men on that field, or they were not going to have themselves a shot to advance to the AFC Championship after this game. But to get it started right out, you get a lot of exposure from some of the unheralded players. Because, as was mentioned, I'm watching something, breaking down, who would win these games in a prediction style format. And the person that I was watching at that time, he gave the Broncos an edge in terms of their receiving core, but mentioned that Courtland Sutton was going to be by far the most, impactful wide receiver in the game as a result of him simply being the best on both teams at this point. And maybe that isn't totally wrong, but one thing that would make this game weird for Denver is that for a while, Courtland Sutton wasn't even involved in the offense. They had to resort to a lot of other players here. And Marvin Mims Jr. truly interests me, because the first damn play saw him collide weirdly with Dorian Williams on the Bills side of things as a special teamer. He got concussed and he was taken out of the game, checked into protocol and everything like that. So already, before you even get a play down, you're losing one of your core guys. But no worries, while he's out of the game, they decided that they were going to heavily involve Pat Bryant II. And instantly, he got them down the field on some pretty good catches to get closer into, the Buffalo red zone at that point. But even he, after one of his later catches on his drive, his third one, he'd been catching all his targets and running some good routes down the field, but he himself would also get injured, and he would be confirmed to be out for the rest of the game with a concussion himself, as he had previously come back from suffering one later in the regular season. So that's just kind of tough luck right there, to be honest. But nonetheless, the Broncos had to find a way. And while it got weird for a second, they nearly fumbled the ball away on their first drive. However, there was offsides, so it didn't end up standing. But in would come LaJordan Humphrey for Mr. Pat Bryant II. And he immediately just bungled everything. I mean, this route was put right on him with an elite ball from Bo Nix. He has a size advantage on the corner guarding him at that point. And somehow, some way, he drops the football. That would have been a touchdown. Instead, they'd have 3rd and 6, and then you would proceed to have Bo Nix overshoot Evan Ingram, because that's pretty typical. And from there, the Broncos would settle for a field goal. But no problem for the Bills, who themselves are dead set on trying to balance out a dominant rushing attack with the short passing game. And as a result, they would be able to drive themselves all the way down the field with pretty much a 7-minute drive. As you would have James Cook III instantly getting his chunks of yards with ease. And you also had Josh Allen continue to use his own size to his advantage on multiple occasions, being able to pick up a 3rd and 4th down on the drive, simply just doing the overpowered quarterback sneak. That would win them the game last week against the Jaguars, say what you want about it, but it's patented. It works for a reason. And this was crazy right here. Because even with the Chiefs not being in the playoffs and that being the narrative for Josh Allen, I suppose, in terms of not having any excuse to not make a Super Bowl, right? Even with the Chiefs not being in the playoffs, the remnants of that particular team still found a way to impact this game. As Mecole Hardman Jr., formerly of Kansas City and Green Bay and New York and some other weird stops along the way, he would get himself in for a 4-yard touchdown that, unironically, as the broadcast team called out, mimicked the same play that he scored the game-winning touchdown in Super Bowl 58 on against the 49ers. In that game that went to overtime. It would help the Bills take the lead here, but again, there's so much irony in that. It's like, come on, man. Both teams would stress ball control, and it would nearly get ugly. But before we even got to that point, we'd be teased a little bit, because you would have Bo Nix lose the football, just weirdly, but it plopped right back into his hands, and he threw an incomplete pass at that point, because there was no room to really make any throw down the field or find a truly open wide receiver. So that would just go down as a wasted play. Very interesting stuff. But wait till you just hear about some of these turnovers as we progress into the game. Because if you thought that was crazy, oh my fucking goodness. Real stuff. Nevertheless, the Bills would have to capitalize off of it anyways, and they would do that. They didn't move an inch, and they would force a 3-and-out. But the Bills, man, would not be able to parlay that particular stop into anything because of one Alex Singleton. It did help that Josh Allen was able to just break out the instant scramble drill. They gave him a wide open gap in space as they were trying to rush him and surround him with the 4th-down linemen. So he just took advantage of that large space and toted it up the field for a 26-yard gain. But Alex Singleton said enough of that. So he decided to take out that evident frustration and just level the shit out of James Cook III. Pretty much at the summit. Picked him up, got a punch out on him, and slammed him down as you had Talanoa Hufanga, the new addition, get in there, recover the fumble, and give the Broncos a chance to take it back themselves in terms of the lead. Which they, after a little while, would do after they hit Marvin Mims Jr. out of the backfield for a 27-yard gain, as he would return and immediately make an impact there. Then as they continued to drive, they decided we're going to run a little bit of a fake, and we're going to allow our backup offensive lineman, Frank Crum, to catch this, report as eligible, and get in the end zone for a touchdown that the Bills would absolutely not be able to live down, and probably still won't, even after all this time. Because he was wide open too. And I get it, you're not expecting the man to even really make a play, but for him to catch it in short distance and then somehow work his way into the score is just wild to me. It truly is. But I digress. So, the Bills, after that just chaotic situation, they'd be forced to respond instantly. And they were not having too much success with deep passes early in the game. But at times, they were able to find a little bit of a rhythm with Brandon Cooks, and he would make his impact right here, working on Patrick Surtain II of all people, and getting a 15-yard catch to move them inside Denver's red zone. Unfortunately for them, penalties and pressure would be their undoing, as you would have Roach make an instant sack pretty much for no gain on him before you had Osiris Torrance commit an offensive holding penalty. Keon Coleman on this play also had a touchdown in hand, and he dropped it. It wouldn't have mattered anyways with the penalty, but this has been the issue with the Bills all season long. That general inconsistency at the top wide receiver spot. To where, again, you're using Shakir, say what you want about him, but the man at a point in this game would end up catching pretty much his first 18 targets on the entire postseason. And all of them are generally short routes. They're not even trying to push the ball down the field like that. Just screenplay after screenplay after screenplay, which was going to be a theme for them at times, and that's what they would look towards. It's an extension of the run, and you're going to sell out for that because it's that dominant. You're loading up the box, so focused on trying to stop James Cook III. So in some situations, it did end up making sense. But you could understand how resorting to specifically those kinds of play calls could also hold this team back. And again, you can question the fact that you have just such lackluster personnel in these areas. Nevertheless, they'd be able to get a field goal there, and from that point onward, the Broncos would just flip the script completely. And I think this is where, more than anything else, the Bills ended up losing this game. We'll get to that true interception later on, as everybody wants to debate. But that's not the play, even if it did happen in overtime. That's not the play that put this game on ice for me. This play would happen after the Broncos, with some redemption, would have LaJordan Humphrey work on a post route and get himself in the end zone for a touchdown catch to make it a 17-0 ball game with about 22 seconds left in the second quarter. So at that point, you're like, okay, you're getting the ball back if you're the Bills. I'm thinking that you're probably just going to take it into the second half and live to see another potential possession later on there, while conserving any opportunity for the Broncos or staving it off in terms of allowing them to get any points on the board at all. Just take it there into the halftime period and you'll be fine. Like, you can still work your way back from a single possession ball game. There's nothing wrong with that. However, for whatever reason, they decided that, okay, we're going to be a little bit aggressive here. And again, keep in mind, at this point, the Bills don't even have any timeouts. So, for whatever reason, you have Josh Allen decide to run the ball. And okay, fair enough. He gets a decent amount of yardage on the play. But then, weirdly, to me, I'm watching this in real time. I'm watching this multiple times in post. And I just don't understand for the life of me still why this man, Josh Allen, was holding the ball with a bare hand out. Essentially just giving away a turnover. Right then and right there. And as he's doing this, he's just holding it so carelessly. And you know you got to protect the ball in that situation. He knows better than that. Yet, you have Nick Bonito chasing behind him, trying to hawk him down. And he promptly gets a hand on him, promptly turns him around. And Josh Allen just loses the ball. It gets pitched back. And you have a mad scramble for it. With not Dane Key, but one of their safeties in Key ultimately being able to fall back on the ball and give the Broncos a free 50-yard field goal to increase the lead to 10 at that particular point. It's not like the Bills were completely out of this game, but by this time, the turnovers were just starting to rack up in a truly tough way for them. And it would get even worse. It was literally a barrage. Last 3 possessions for them in this point of time would end in turnovers, because you'd have to start out the second half, Nick Bonito get after his ass again and force a sack fumble, recovered by Roach deep, and I mean deep, in Buffalo territory. To the point where if the Broncos played this right, this could have been a 27-10 ball game at this point. If not for the Bills defense somehow, someway, finding it within themselves to tighten it up, this was going to completely blow the game out of the water. Instead, it remained a two-possession ball game as Will Lutz would bang in a 33-yarder. Man, oh my gosh. Wow. But there you go. You would have the Bills from there, with Dalton Kincaid being able to get down the field, set them up very nicely. And ultimately, on a play which was a smartly called RPO, you had them backed up deep in zone, so they gave Keon Coleman that is, an easy read to work with. And he would capitalize by lunging into the end zone on a 10-yard score to give them another touchdown on the board and decrease the lead to just 6 points. How both teams would end up following that up, however, would be very anticlimactic, is you would have Bo Nix just have a pass get batted down and then worked pretty much by Deon Walker. Like, he threw it right in his direction. Walker jumped up at the right time, and you're not really expecting it. It's essentially a free interception at that point. Didn't even get past the line of scrimmage before the man was able to locate the football and get his mitts on it. As impressive of a play as that was, Josh Allen said, fuck it. I have Keon Coleman, I believe he was trying to target down there somewhere. And you had the safety help as Hufanga would creep back, but you also had PJ Locke III recovering on the play, and he would swoop in just as the ball is about to reach the intended target. He swoops in for the alert to give them the ball right back. So at that point, they'd mentioned that you had essentially 4 turnovers between both squads in the last 10 minutes of play. That's how crazy this shit was getting at this point. And it's wild to think about that. But somehow, even with all that going down, with most of them being forced on the Bills, the Broncos are still up at this point. Mind you, that as this possession was getting underway, as James Cook III was starting to tote the rock well, and I'm thinking at this point, you're getting near the fourth quarter, it's almost about time to start leaning on him fully, because he's been that great of a rusher all season long. You know, you run the ball predominantly, and you're that effective in doing it, to a point it's like maybe the Broncos can't stop you if you continue to pound the rock. That was my thinking. They would also mention a crazy stat line at this point, though, as road teams before this game with a turnover margin of -3 or worse were 1-85 all time entering this particular game. And I mean, hey, we say it all the time. That's why they said it, you know, in the pregame as they were being interviewed by sideline reporters. Ball security fucking matters. Even without that number, you'd have a general understanding that you can't turn the ball over X amount of times and be able to come away with a victory. It rarely happens in playoff football. That's just the truth. But the Bills are trying to find a way to beat those odds completely. You would instantly have Shakir just take an RPO pass, pretty much a slant route at that point. He caught it right in stride as Singleton just moved out of the way an inch, mind you. At that point, he was distracted by something else, wasn't committing to the route, so Allen had just enough space to make that pass work, and Shakir would do what he does best after the catch, just run all the way down the field for a 46-yard gain and get them in the red zone, where you'd have Dalton Kincaid get up top on Talanoa Hufanga and moss them for a 14-yard touchdown catch to take the 1-point lead. If the Bills could parlay a potential stop into any points of their own, they had a chance to control the game in the same way that they were able to late last week against Jacksonville. And promptly, they had AJ Epinesa get his second bat down of the game, just getting up essentially like an Iowa basketball player to pluck these passes down. And at that point, the Broncos and Crosha, who had struggled to really punt in that Raiders game, would put together a nice punt here but it just barely went into the end zone. So you have them starting from the 20-yard line, and the Bills were trying to drop. They were doing exactly what I thought they were going to do in terms of balancing out the short passes with the runs. They were just burning clock at that point. And it's not like these were just lost play calls. No, every single one had a genuine purpose. Even when you get to potential miscues, as Josh Allen nearly lost a fumble again. PJ Locke III would force it. Luckily, his offensive lineman fell on it. But they were still able to, even after all that, burn as much clock as possible. Time's winding down at this point. 6 minutes, 5 minutes, and eventually we get into 4-minute territory, where they had 3rd and 8, and unfortunately, on what was going to be, intended to be, another screen-like route in Shakir's direction, it was thrown so low to the ground. And you still have, I guess, as everybody's been saying on these damn broadcast teams, the Charbonnet recovered fumble in the end zone of that Rams game on Thursday night just inspired everybody to play out a sequence in its entirety, even if the whistle blows. Shakir would get into the end zone in this situation, but they replayed it in real time, and you could see the ball just dirt the ground, pretty much. Bounced right up into Shakir's hands from there, which again would be an incomplete pass at that point. That was unfortunate, and that probably would have been the call to take them over the top, but instead, they had to settle for a field goal. Now, at this point, the struggles have been evident for that entire Broncos offense. They had a number of punts, and the fact that they were not able to capitalize on that turnover pretty much in Buffalo territory with a true touchdown kind of hurt them, because for most of the second half, they weren't really heard from. They had just about 30 total yards to this point. Bo Nix had only completed about 2 passes or so. So it's a rough stretch for everybody at that point. But hey, this sequence right here would quickly make everybody seemingly forget about those developments in the game. Why do I say that? Because when he had to make the plays, Bo Nix, to his credit, as much shit as we may give him, he made the plays. It started off with him actually being able to get the ball Courtland Sutton's way. This man to this point didn't have a single catch. Yet on 2 of these plays, he logged a total of 36 yards, including a 3rd and 11 pickup with a strike over the middle to haul it in and move the sticks, get them in Buffalo territory pretty much at the 2-minute warning. And at that point, with them having all 3 timeouts, with them utilizing the 2-minute warning there, the ball was in their court. They could do whatever they wanted. Their plan was essentially to try to ensure that they had the last possession of the game. In a way, that would be my thought. And it was looking like they could do that for a second. However, when you get Bo Nix doming up like this, you have to take the shot. And with a minute to go, he would. As Marvin Mims Jr. would show up again, getting leverage on his man and hauling in a beauty on the sideline of the end zone, essentially, for a 26-yard touchdown catch to help the Broncos take the lead in another situation where it's a 1-score ball game and it's coming down to the wire. But again, with both of their clutch resumes this season, this was to be expected in a way, no matter how unlikely it may have seemed. It would be Josh Allen's turn to make something happen. And granted, it would help them tremendously with the Ohio State man and Jonathan Cooper having a tough penalty in that situation. Again, as I'd said, it had been ailing them all year when it came to the penalties. And that's just not one that you can have there. You know what I'm saying? Nevertheless, they would be forced to resort to yet another hook and ladder to get a big chunk of yards down the field. And with Ray Davis being able to pick that up, they were seemingly in field goal range where they stalled out before you had Matthew Prater kick a 50-yard field goal. Now, again, I understand that the man's 41 years old, but in a game for him where he was returning to the team of which he once played for, they genuinely thought it was a good idea to try to call a timeout to ice the man who set the stadium record for the longest field goal there in its history, and was truly a prolific kicker with that Broncos squad. There's no way that they thought they were going to phase him, to be honest. Like, I was really shocked to see that. But you would have this game get into overtime. And man, we'd have shit get crazy. Now, you would have the Broncos start off okay with getting Courtland Sutton this first down conversion. But everything after that was just, Throws were just underwhelming in a way. And you also had the Broncos at times get so over-reliant on their kind of RPO screen pass game that the Bills were able to just snuff that shit out completely. You combine all of that, and it resulted in yet another 3-and-out, leading to the Bills getting the ball back and having an opportunity to win the game. You know, as we've said, that sequence, even though, we can constantly bring that up about the 13 seconds and the overtime dagger to Travis Kelce in that game, that was the reason why they would go on to implement this rule in overtime where both teams get a shot at possessing the ball, especially when it comes to postseason football. That is why it exists. And Josh Allen was yet again in a scenario where he could have been the beneficiary of that. Truly. That's just what it is. It's not anything against him, but that's the truth. They implemented the rule because of the way that game went and because of all the woes of the Bills brass surrounding that particular matchup. He had a chance to capitalize here, and he did not make good on that whatsoever. Not even close. Now, it did help immensely that, despite James Cook III having a good overall day on the ground, them being able to stuff him for a 1-yard loss on this first down would completely derail their drive because it now put them behind schedule and it forced them to have to push the ball deep at some point. Like, sure, they would try to have Mecole Hardman Jr. get deep, and that throw was that throw was so tough, it got to where it needed to be, only Mecole Hardman Jr. dropped it. And, okay, fair play. There's nothing that Josh Allen can do about that. When you have Mecole Hardman Jr. dropping that pass, he was wide open. It was a tougher throw for him, but he made it. It got there, and it hit him in the hands. That's what you want, and you don't capitalize on that. That's a little strange to me, but I digress. Nevertheless, on this third down, you had the infamous interception catch, as some people will argue, heard around the world. And my thing on it is this. Watching it in real time, watching it be replayed several times, yes, it was taken from the midst of Brandon Cooks. He never had possession, though. He just did not. Like, the ball, I could see the ball as you slow it down. I could see it coming loose. And the rule is that you have to, as a wide receiver, survive the ground in that scenario. He did not. I give more credit to Jaquan McMillan in this situation, who with him, I remember the interception that he had in that Browns game on Monday Night Football the previous season. And that was just him literally getting acrobatic, working the pass, and then somehow getting up and scoring a pick six. So this man, over the course of his time there, and I do think he's one of their, situational cornerbacks. I don't think he's necessarily a third or fourth cornerback. I think they have him placed in specific formations and things like that. That's more than likely how they run their defense. But nevertheless, whenever he's in the game, he makes some sneaky plays on the football every time. You can pencil him in for that, at least every few games or so. And it's interesting to think about it that way. Truly. But his ass would come up clutch for the Broncos there. And from that standpoint, they could control the rest of the game, play their brand of football. You know, they've been a team that traditionally runs a much slower offense. Even if they're at, somewhat decent strength right now. They aren't really trying to do too much at that point, and they don't have to force anything. On this drive, I think that would become even more relevant. Say what you want, and maybe with this Taron Johnson one, when it comes to defensive pass interference, maybe that one could have been debatable. But you still had on this same play Joey Bosa, of all people. And granted, he had some decent plays in this game. But for him to commit roughing the passer on Bo Nix is crazy. And then, if you understand, as a Chargers fan, this is the same man who complained to the refs as the Jags made that captivating comeback against the Chargers in that season. He was crying to the refs about something that he didn't particularly like, although he committed a penalty on that play and got himself and the team in absolute trouble in that scenario. That was on him. Now, all these years later, you are actively doing this again, and even if it didn't count, it's like, what is the point? Second down. Just forced to stop. It was an incomplete pass anyways. You have no reason to be leveling a quarterback like that after the ball's already out of his hands and that fucking late. You just can't have that happen. And it's ironic. Then you would have the same stuff go down. Because Bo Nix as well would have what would be an ill-fated, and I mean ill-fated play here. As he would go on essentially a quarterback sweep, that he'd already run on the drive to take it into overtime, essentially, in the first place, by them getting the touchdown there. He picked up a fourth down off that. So it's not like they hadn't had experience with running the play before, but it would end brutally for him here. And you would get this weird sequence from Bo Nix where he just started to sail a couple of passes at this time. And he would end up making it work because the ball here to Marvin Mims Jr. was underthrown. And this Trey White situation isn't even debatable. As much as people want to argue about that in ref ball. The nigga literally tackled him midair as he was trying to go for the football. He wasn't even looking behind him. He wasn't even trying to play the ball in that situation. If he did, he probably could have come up with a timely breakup or maybe even an interception. But instead, he's like this, trying to wrap up Marvin Mims Jr. in his lower body and bring him down. And you know you can't do that. So they promptly called that a flag. Then he decided to get a penalty as well tacked onto it for unsportsmanlike conduct, trying to talk shit to the refs. That's not on them. You know what you did, my nigga. Like, come on, man. What the fuck are we doing? And at that point, they decided not to run any more plays. It would set up a 23-yard field goal for Will Lutz, and that would end up being good to give the Broncos the massive upset, in some people's eyes, in the 33-30 victory. They deserve all the praise in this game. Like, say what you want about that narrative for Josh Allen, and we could get into glimpses of that in time. But for Bo Nix in this game, it wasn't always pretty for him, yet down the stretch of this game, he played very, very well. And one could argue he even outplayed Josh Allen to an extent. In this game, he had 279 passing yards along with 3 touchdowns and an interception. You'd want to see that completion percentage go up at just 56.5%. But again, when the game called for him to step up and take over, he did exactly that. Which makes what would happen in the postgame all the more devastating. It would be detailed by Sean Payton pretty much in an instant. And even he was trying to hold off on the news, but figured that it would be better to have everyone exposed to the information early that Bo Nix would be out for the rest of the season with a broken bone in his ankle. And I'm just like, man, I feel so bad for him still. because you performed that well down the stretch. And you have a shot in your second year to play in your first championship game in the playoffs. Akin to what the Commanders were able to do with Jaden Daniels as a rookie, right? Like, that's tremendous stuff. That's tremendous stuff. And his ability to lead the team in this game can't be understated. But now you lose that instantly. You don't even get a chance to really do anything about it because of that injury in that moment. It's horrible. I can't imagine how the team felt in that moment. Because you have to understand, you're coming off of an overtime thriller to start out the divisional round. So it was a tremendous game through and through, and much cleaner on the Broncos' end. They earned that win. And you don't even have but like maybe 5 or so minutes to truly enjoy it before you have to hear that Bo Nix is now out for the rest of the season, and now they're going to be looking to potentially Jarrett Stidham's way, with him not playing in about 760 days, or potentially in that scenario, if that's not the move, look for a different free agent quarterback in this time to loan throughout the rest of this potential playoff run for you. It's just such a weird spot to be in, man. It truly is. Marvin Mims Jr. in this game would have 8 receptions for 93 yards and a touchdown, while Cortland Sutton would have 4 receptions for 53 yards. And R.J. Harvey would have 5 receptions for 46 yards. Alex Singleton and Talanoa Hufanga both had over 10 tackles, with Alex Singleton accounting for 14 and also 11 solo tackles. P.J. Locke III had an interception, a pass deflection, and 9 tackles. And the team as a whole combined for 3 total sacks on the day. Interestingly enough for the Broncos, that wouldn't be the only piece of news, however, regarding potential injuries, because as I recently saw on ESPN, it was mentioned, and also via NFL.com too, was mentioned that they opened up the practice window for J.K. Dobbins and that he could potentially come back for the AFC Championship game. And I do think that could be huge. Now, has the Broncos' rushing attack been particularly great throughout the season? No, especially with the way they run their type of offense. You'd want it to be a little better than that at its current standing at this point. I will say that. But at the same time, when J.K. Dobbins was in the lineup and playing, the unit was a lot more formidable. And again, it makes sense. You know, J.K. Dobbins is a little bit bigger, a little bit stockier of a player. Meanwhile, without him, you're relying on essentially R.J. Harvey and Jaleel McLaughlin at this point. R.J. Harvey can be a workhorse, but he's on the smaller side. And same for Jaleel McLaughlin. You're not really going to classify either one of them as true power guys. And with J.K. Dobbins having that ability in him to be that at this point, while also still retaining, even after some of his injuries, a decent amount of speed, that's a great change of pace to have. So that could be a valuable addition for the Denver squad if they can successfully get him back before the game. As for the Bills, man, and yes, this game, again, going to overtime, I have spent a substantial amount of time on it, but there's still so much to get to when it comes to this other side of things. Because, man, you can't deny, even if, it might be a forced narrative at this point, yeah, it's tough for Josh Allen right now. And he felt it instantly. Because, again, this probably was going to be your greatest chance. None of the, world-class foes that he's constantly been on the losing side of these games against, they weren't there to stop him or take him down. And you proceed to not only, again, lose to a second-year quarterback, you get outplayed by him in a game where the overall turnovers truly affected this Bills team more than anything else. So instead of complaining about a call that was correct about the whole damn time, y'all need to be focusing more on what the hell Josh Allen wasn't doing out there, and that's protecting the ball. Man accounted for 4 turnovers by himself, and he also had another fumble that he would get back. While accounting for 3 touchdowns and 283 yards passing on 64.1% completion, but he also had 66 rushing yards on the ground as well. Like, road teams with this would improve to 1-86 all time when dealing with that turnover margin in this kind of game, and it just cannot happen. He knows that is absolutely unacceptable. So that's where a lot of this game ends up lying here. One could argue, though, 39 passes may be a lot, and considering how James Cook III ran in this, the team as a whole averaged 5.1 yards per carry and had James Cook go for 117 yards on 24 carries himself. And I'm thinking at the same time, yeah, it probably would have been wiser, especially down the stretch of the game, to feed him a little more. But at that point, what are you truly going to do? Man, oh man, oh man. Dalton Kincaid would have 6 receptions for 83 yards, and Khalil Shakir would have 7 receptions for 75 yards. Cole Bishop and Cam Lewis also had 10 tackles, or more than 10 tackles each, while Cam Lewis also accounted for 2 pass deflections, and Cole Bishop had 2 tackles for loss. Man, and you know, the Bills at this point, you're thinking about a lot in your mind at that point. That call could still be in play for you, but at the end of the day, it's another lost season with a highly touted quarterback in Josh Allen, no matter what it is that you may think about him. Truly an elite guy. And they still have been in the same position for most of these years when it comes to these premature playoff exits, when they seemingly have the kind of scheme and personnel to get to where exactly they want to be in this league. And they just, for yet another year, don't get there. I think the situation for them coming into the season was that, okay, we still have a brief hold on the AFC East. And throughout the past 5 years, we have not even made good on any of that. We have nothing to show for it. Sure, we have a few appearances in the AFC Championship game, but we haven't even reached the Super Bowl one time, let alone win one. If there was ever a time to get over the hump, it was now. And they didn't make it happen. Not only did they not make it happen, but on the other end, and I mean, we'll get to the game in a second, but even with the way that the Patriots were playing throughout the year, and yes, you can talk about them potentially having a weaker schedule, but even when they faced off against the Bills the first time, the Pats, in the regular season, and won that game, there was already a question being thrown out about whether or not their window in terms of dominating the AFC East was over. And by the end of the regular season, one could say that it was. You had the Bills be forced to settle for a wild card spot while having the Patriots secure the division. Like, it was slowly ticking at this point. And it all culminated in one of the worst possible performances you could have had in a scenario like this. So it leaves you scrambling for options. When you're stuck in the same spot, you're just trying to calculate a number of different ways to get yourself out of that rut. And it's like you're not going to let go of some of your stronger personnel. You're most certainly not letting Josh Allen walk. So they turned to a completely different man. As the Bills yesterday morning, in fact, was breaking news all around the circuit of the league. All over the place. They would fire Sean McDermott yesterday. And I'm like, I still don't really feel all that good about it. I don't. Now, again, with everything that I said, it makes sense a little bit. Like, he's been there for about 9 years, okay, and granted, the first few years were going to be rough, but with this point of time now, he's essentially been leading the best team in the AFC East for the past 5 seasons, and again, time after time after time, the team as a whole has fallen short. And there are a number of things that he's done personally, especially when it comes to some of his decision making, that can be questioned as a coach, especially being more of a defensive mind, and then proceeding to have the defense give up 33 points to this team like that. You're not anticipating that, and you could use that as a potential strike against a man. But at the same time, there are very few coaches in the modern day who have had as much success with one team as he has. I mean, it's very hard to consistently be in the playoff picture even. And that's crazy to say. In a way, but looking at this, his entire time in Buffalo as a head coach, for the 9 years he'd been there, he'd been 98-50 overall. And they have finished with at least 10 wins or more in the last 7 seasons overall. They've been consistent playoff contenders. And yeah, they have fallen short. You want them to get over the top of things and ultimately come out with a win. But at the same time, he's also, for the past 6 seasons, won at least a playoff game with a, 6 and 6 record, which can be considered as a little bit, just a little bit mediocre, sure. Well, 8-6 rather. But at the same time, it's just crazy. Like, this is the man who, through and through, was down for the team. Literally saw a bit of a press conference with him talking about, again, complaining about even, if we can say that, the call that gave Jaquan McMillan the interception. And, of course, being on the other side, he's going to believe and stand up for his guys and thinking that Brandon Cooks caught it. So he's there talking the whole time, and he says, I'm doing this for Buffalo. And your decision in that situation is to give him a get-out-of-town free card by sending him off like that? That suddenly? It feels reactionary. And it feels like they don't have a true backup plan. There aren't really many to look towards, because of just how crazy this coaching cycle currently is. Like, with the guys that are actively trying to get jobs out here. Not including Mike Tomlin. Because, again, he's already said he's only wanted to coach the Steelers. And that's it. He is not really that hellbent on getting back into it. So you can take him out of the picture for a second. And just look at some of the other guys that are at this point, as of this recording, are still on the market. None of them are really going to be better than Sean McDermott when it comes to that consistency. Yeah, you want to be able to make Super Bowl runs, and you want to be able to get one for your franchise guy, Josh Allen. But sometimes the consistency should override that. And to have this game go this way, with a number of different factors to take into account here, and to just fire the man like that, seems a bit outlandish. It does. There's no way that he can control his quarterback turning over the ball that much. That is not a coaching thing. There's no way he can control some of the plays that these defenders made throughout the game on their own volition. That's on them. That's not on him as a coach. So why be so quick to fire a man who put in that much effort throughout his time there to bring this team to new heights over the past 7 years especially? And also, when you look at it, he also was the most accomplished Bills head coach in, I think, either wins or win percentage. The most accomplished Bills coach since Marv Levy. Well, Marv Levy. So it's like you're replacing that caliber of coach with who exactly? Even they don't know to this point. I mean, you're going to start conducting searches. But again, it's going to be hard for you to find anybody that you can definitively say has a better resume. Maybe you go with the enticing young hotshot pick. But it's like, damn, can you guarantee for sure that even if you go that route, they're going to be able to keep this team in constant contention for that damn long? I'm not too sure I can say that with a whole lot of confidence. It's like, I don't even know truly where they'd start. It sucks that McDermott has to go out like that. And I do think that he'll find a different stop elsewhere, and he deserves that. But if you are Buffalo as well, there's a lot more to take into account here. And it's just interesting to me that Brandon Beane, at the same time, in this scenario, was promoted to the president of football operations for the entire organization. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, both of those moves are happening at the same time? What the fuck is going on here? Like, there is genuinely no way that should even be possible. But I digress. It's insane to hear that. Because while one can question some of the things that Sean McDermott was doing as a coach, and granted that may be fair, but at the same time, bro, at the same fucking time, you have to understand that at a point, who exactly am I working with out there? And we've been at this multiple times, addressing just how lackluster the wide receiver core has been. Even when you look at a couple of the linebackers outside of maybe Matt Milano and Shaq Thompson, everything else might be a little questionable. You know, some of the cornerback depth has certainly been tested over the past few seasons, not in a good way. So there are a number of different avenues to address here. And we're just looking specifically at Sean McDermott, despite him still being able, by the way, in spite of all this, to make good on that and have this team constantly working with less, yet making themselves into formidable championship caliber at times, especially in the first couple years of this 2020 stretch, right? They have been championship contenders with this lackluster squad. So I'm just not sure what that tells. Like, come on, man. I mean, yes, when you look at some of these specific picks, okay, they have hit. Some of them have. But the misses have been terrible. They've been bad. And oh my, there are a lot of misses. Like, it's not even a joke. I don't even need to rattle all of them off. But I'm pulling this up for myself on Football Reference. And it's like, yo, like, just looking at some of these names, man. Nathan Peterman was obviously not it. And granted, you know, Brandon Beane I was listening to a video where they referenced a situation where he was just talking shit back to the people complaining about the lack of getting a true number one wide receiver. Yes, people were definitely booing this Josh Allen pick. He was a raw prospect coming out of college, and it has most certainly paid off to this time. That's for damn sure. But I mean, like, what in the fuck are some of these picks, man? Like Zay Jones in 2017 as well. Ray McCloud in 2018 along with Austin Proehl. Tommy Sweeney in 2019. Cody Ford as well in the second round. Voshon Joseph isn't even in, like, you don't even know who that is. Jake Fromm, as well as Isaiah Hodgins, who's now doing work with another team. So it's just like, when you, as I said with Chris Greer as well, when you are running through all this lackluster talent and not retaining core pieces on your roster for the long haul, you're essentially left consistently doing what the Bills have been doing. Trying to have some patchwork go down. You know, get some free agents on small deals to try to shore up the issue. And it doesn't even come close to making that happen at all. At all. Like, you can't try to substitute anything like that, especially if you're not getting top-end talent, to come into Buffalo out of free agency. You gotta be able to have a much more effective drafting process, and they just seem to not. But now you want this man having full autonomy of football operations in a way across this entire organization. That could become a problem, a big problem. It just felt unreal, to be honest. And again, I genuinely don't know why. What exactly went into this? Who exactly had an influence in making this decision? Was this a decision that was made amongst themselves? Did they involve a particular player? I'm not sure. It's probably something, if it did involve a particular player, that we'd hear about years down the line. We are not going to really find that out anytime soon. But, man, hey, it leaves Sean McDermott out of a job, even though this game was not even on him. He coached as well as one could in the situation, I'd argue. And you still, in that situation, are deemed as not doing enough to warrant retaining your position. It's just incredibly weird to me. But, again, respect to the Broncos, first and foremost. Like, more respect to them. You know, we can make the narrative about that, and it does hurt them that Sean McDermott is now gone. But the Broncos, despite being depleted going into it, will have a chance to claim their stake to a potential Super Bowl appearance for their first time since 2016, and ironically. And, you know, people want to talk about that 15-16 Broncos defense, which is warranted with the way they were able to limit offenses through the air and have that dynamic press rush led by Von Miller get going, along with DeMarcus Ware, by the way, older as he might have been at the time, was still a productive player on that side of the ball. And people have been saying throughout the regular season that this defense, in a way, reminds them of that 2015-16 Broncos squad. So, if they could actually manage to make it there and have Jarrett Stidham lead them there somehow, man, that would make things incredibly intriguing. But I suppose we will find out next week. And of course, they would have to wait to find out who their next opponent would be. And we'll get there in time. But man, oh man, oh man. And seeing as this game went this particular way, I'll be much, much quicker about it. To be fair and give justice to the other games here, but I can't not talk my damn stuff about this game right here. This Seahawks and 49ers game had my ass pumped up the entire fucking time. The entire time. I mean, you entered this game, you already had the 49ers face off against them 2 weeks ago in Santa Clara. And throughout that game, they were shut down the entire time at that point. So the Seahawks were pretty much awaiting whoever was going to win last week. Depending on the seeding, they needed to face off against the lowest seed, and with the 49ers being able to fend off even more injuries with losing Kittle in the last game and winning against the Eagles, they would now promptly face off against the Seahawks. If you remember, Sam Darnold himself literally went up to Brock Purdy and was saying, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks, as they were having, those pleasantries after the game. And promptly, around 2 weeks later, those guys are facing off against each other again. Yes, the 49ers were coming into this thing hampered. Understandable. And, they would suffer even more injuries in this game. But from the onset, it was all fucking Seahawks. You just have to play the team in the front of you. And they demolished them. Just like it goes without saying. But just think about it from this perspective. Just put yourself in this position. You're preparing for the game. You are in the Pacific Northwest in beautiful Lehman Field. Okay? And you have Doug Baldwin, legend of the fucking franchise, coming out and rallying the fan base as he raises the 12th flag. You have Cam Chancellor come out and rally the crowd up with a C chant. You have legends of the fucking team coming out, popping out to get this crowd as hyped up and as loud as possible from the onset. And then the ensuing kickoff takes place with the crowd still loud, and I think as I was watching something earlier, they logged it at about 128 decibels. An insane level of noise. As Rashid Shaheed himself, the wonders that this motherfucker has done for this team since he's gotten here is crazy. You can't make it up. You have all those things take place before the game even begins from a pageantry standpoint. And he proceeds to take the fucking opening kickoff to the house for a 95-yard touchdown, even with bitch-ass Eddie Pinheiro trying to trip him. And he was promptly flagged for it. I'm going off, man. I'm hyped as fuck. And I'm talking about, okay, come on, bro. What's the flag? What's the flag, bro? What's the flag? What's the flag? Why are y'all taking so much time? So the play ended up standing. And immediately, before some of the fans could even hit their fucking seats, Seahawks were up within a matter of 13 seconds. Like, when I say this damn San Francisco team got blitzed, because if you thought getting shut down 13-3 was bad, a Seahawks team that had traditionally throughout the year gotten off to slow starts, and that was a theme for them coming into this game. That would be a worry for some people, seeing as they were coming off an extra week and some change of rest, right? Like, that could happen in theory. However, they would just keep it fucking going. The defense was fucking firing all night long, to where the 49ers could legitimately, for a while, do nothing. They had to get desperate early on. Like, yes, they were able to pick up a few first downs on the ensuing drive, But then you had Kyle Juszczyk on 4th down trying to run an option play, and it failed immediately. And at that point, you just knew that this was not going to be a game that they could fuck around with at all. Like, it was going to be a complete and total beatdown. It had all the makings of it. Even with the 49ers being able to force a quick stop on Zach Charbonnet with a tackle for loss from B Winners, they were still able to get on the field. They were still able to get a field goal here. And then Ernest Jones IV as well would have himself a great overall game, eventually being able to force his 3rd interception on Brock Purdy in all 3 games overall on the year against this team. While on this sequence, being able to rip the ball right out of Jake Tonjes' hands when he thought he had a free 1st down conversion. And then you have multiple Seahawks trying to get on the ball. Ultimately, Julian Love recovered it, and you would have the Seahawks work a short field, get down, and have Sam Darnold, even if he wasn't asked to do much for most of the game, and that could be a worry for some people as well, when he was asked to throw the football, this shit to Jackson Smith and Jigba in the back of the end zone was a dom with some true Joe Drag swag to put the Seahawks, before the first quarter even ended, up 17-0. And at that point, even with me being happy as fuck, I understood from the 49ers perspective that this next drive was probably going to be their most important one. Like, man, you had to find a way to respond to this, because this was getting out of hand quickly in a way that, again, for most of the other Seahawks games, aside from a few earlier in the season, take the Washington game for reference. They don't want to remember that one. But just to have some context there, right? In those kinds of games, they were able to blitz teams early on to where they didn't have to do much in the second half. And you could be trending in the same direction if you didn't get anything figured out on this next drive. Luckily for them, in a way, they were able to get down the field. It took a lot. It truly did. I can't even hold you. However, they were able to drive. They were able to pick up a few 1st downs, and they did get into Seahawks territory. Unfortunately for them, Christian McCaffrey would be stuffed just short of what would have been 4-down territory at that point. They probably would have run a sneak, I assume. However, they would settle for their points and get a field goal to decrease this to a true 2-possession lead. And from there, they would have possibly their best chance to truly establish some more momentum as the second quarter would wind down, because they would force a quick 3-and-out. And granted, you had Sam Darnold throw a fuck it ball in Rashid Shaheed's direction, which, can you blame him with him starting out the game like that with his playmaking ability? You can't blame his ass. But you would have them get down the field once more, with Tonjes being able to step up mightily for George Kittle, to be completely honest with you. And that would be important. However, with Ricky Pearsall in this scenario, he would come back in, and he did have a great catch over the middle. It's just that the ball hit the ground as he was trying to secure the catch, which would make it incomplete, and thus Pinheiro was forced to kick a 56-yard field goal, with it eventually being good from that range to decrease the lead to 11 now. The Seahawks would briefly be stopped, and on this play, which would end up being a penalty, they would unfortunately lose Zach Charbonnet, as recently reported by multiple NFL insiders, for the rest of the season with a torn ACL. I thought it was just a standard knee injury, and I mean, even as you get later into the game, he was on the sidelines, on the bike, I guess, trying to get ready, trying to see if he could go. And I guess at some point he was advised to just not. Ultimately, Mike McDonald would come out with that information yesterday, and it was just terribly unfortunate to hear that. Like, Charbonnet has been a tremendous piece for this Seahawks team over the entire season. So to lose him could be major. All the focus at that point, however, would be on the dynamic playmakers between Rashid Shaheed immediately being able to take a 30-yard reverse down the field and cut up all over the place just because, with the kind of speed that he has. Also, Kenneth Walker III would activate his ability and be able to truly showcase what he can do when he's getting a majority of the touches. Because as dynamic as the man is in space and can be, that had been the situation for most of the season. We'd get near the red zone and we'd have him be subbed out for Charbonnet in these situations. Nope. It was all Kenneth Walker III, and it was all the Seahawks after that 6-0 run from San Francisco, as they would quite literally score the next 24 points unanswered, being up 24-6 at halftime, and then just continuing to lay the fucking hammer down. They forced 2 more turnovers on downs in this third quarter, and also had Ernest Jones IV just snatch a free interception from Luke Farrell, the Ohio State man himself, as they were up 27-0 at that point. You also had Kenneth Walker III continue to just take advantage of short fields at that point, because again, it's all 4-down territory for the 49ers at that time. So they just continued to play their style of ball, and it kept paying off. Ultimately, with another Kenneth Walker III rushing touchdown, his third of the night, which would tie him for the most in a single playoff game with Sean Alexander, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know how they didn't reference that in game. Like, that's some legendary shit. That's Sean Alexander we're talking about. Gotta put some respect on that man's name. Nevertheless, at that point, it's truly garbage time. And, after this sack fumble forced by DeMarcus Lawrence, falling into the hands of the dynamic rookie and Nick Amawuri, at that point, they weren't really concerned with keeping any of the starters in, at least on the Seahawks side of things, and likewise for the 49ers. As the game would end with the Seahawks getting a resounding 41-6 victory. I mean, man, it was just domination from the onset all around. And again, for those that want to continue to hate, because again, Sam Darnold at this game, he finished with the lowest output in terms of total yardage amongst any quarterback who played this week. He had just 124 yards and a touchdown on 70.6% completion. But that's been the point throughout the entire year. Even in the games where the offense was doing a little bit more, and Sam Darnold, for a time, go back to that Washington game. Understand how that man completed his first 16 passes or something like that, and had about 4 touchdowns in the first half. If your defense is playing that well, and you're protecting the ball like that, and you're able to run the ball the way that the Seahawks team did, is they had 175 yards on the ground on 5.3 yards per carry. Also understand that a lot of these drives as well, again, with the way that defense was fucking clicking, they were able to get shorter fields to work with. And so the yards are not always going to jump off the table. The key was just converting on all of those opportunities, and they did exactly that. And that's the goal at the end of the day. Yes, we have seen Sam Darnold be able to take over ball games this season. He has. And you want to see it consistently. You want to see it in the playoffs to truly give him some legitimacy. I do understand that. But at the same time, this defense is fucking like that. And can you blame them for playing through that? Can you blame them for playing through a rushing unit that had been heating up over the past few weeks of the regular season, even without having Zach Charbonnet in for a full game? No, you can't. So, from that standpoint, man, it's hey, dude, geez, man, you gotta give some respect there. The defense as a whole had 7 tackles for loss, along with 4 TFLs and 2 sacks. And that ain't even accounting for just how much Brock Purdy was under fucking duress. That ain't accounting for all the things they were able to do on their side to just completely limit this team. Like, it's fucking legit. Believe me. And these are some wild stats to throw out before I get to the 49ers side of things very quickly. Because, again, I don't want to be biased about it. This was clearly not a game compared to the others that was truly competitive at any one point of time. It wasn't. So I'd be stretching it to try to overdo anything on that end. But it's like, yo, they would give up their first run of greater than 11 yards in the last 5 games. And that only came on a busted Brock Purdy scramble. They also, with the end result of this game, if I'm not mistaken, because I can look at this right now, I think the streak is longer than this, but I can go and check this for myself. Because to get an idea of just how dominant this defense has been, they, on their end, have not given up a touchdown in the last 8 quarters of play. The last 8 total quarters of play, all coming against the 49ers, and they have not allowed a single touchdown. That shit is absolutely crazy to think about. But now we got to get to the 49ers side. Because, man, I would say this for them. Firstly, yes, the injuries matter, and yes, they got worse. They mentioned that Christian McCaffrey was dealing with a banged-up shoulder and a stinger and trying to play through that. Jake Tonjes, I literally see Jake Tonjes. He's running around on one of these drives later on in the second half. And on some non-contact shit, his knee just gives out. And he's taken out of the game for Luke Farrell to come in. So, like, a lot of this stuff is getting weird. It gets to a point where the shit is truly outlandish. I do understand that if you are a 49ers fan. But at the same time, you not only had Jaywan Jennings say that he could not wait for this matchup, you still had Diamador Lenoir talking massive shit throughout the entirety of this time, from the last game onward, when it comes to dealing with JSN, and he headbutted his ass in this game for some weird reason. I don't get what the hell is going on with him, and I would have loved the fucking JSN touchdown on his head so he could shut the fuck up, but I digress, right? You have that going down, and then you also have them before the game even begins. They always do this thing with the boombox to have their entire team get turned up and everything. And in some hilarious twist, I saw Mac Jones throw up guns. And that was definitely interesting to see. But yeah, you had all that going down. You were talking all that tough shit. You were making yourself out to be a big dog in that situation. And when the time came for you to play that way, even if you were a hampered roster, you still have to go out there and handle your business. And you came very far from doing that. Then you have a lot of the players really trying to bring that point home about the injuries. So I was like, which one is it? Or are you truly in a situation where you're going to be a weaker team if you're injured, and you have Lenoir talking about, oh, it would have been a blowout if all of our guys were healthy? Is it truly that? Or, like, what exactly are you trying to compensate for here? I don't know. Like, the numbers don't even tell you how bad it was. And I mean, even them getting to 108 rushing yards on the ground on 4 yards of carry doesn't even really do it much justice at all. Even when you look at Brock Purdy's passing numbers, 140 yards on 55.6% completion and an interception, even with 7 passes deflected, still don't tell you just how much pressure this nigga was under. And I mean, Trent Williams was back playing. And they were able to generate that kind of pressure on him consistently, on him in some occasions, and definitely in other areas of their offensive line. Like, it would be delusional to say that having all of their core guys back would make this a blowout in one way or the other. Same video I was watching was talking about how Kyle Shanahan was going to potentially outcoach Mike McDonald, and I mean, fair enough. You have a guy with more playoff experience, even though he did blow Super Bowl 51. Click off the video, Falcons fans. He did blow that. But he has been a tremendous coach for this 49ers team. And again, this is where the excuses just get a little more crazy. Because the man was able to string together multiple wins in a row with having Mac Jones at the helm, with having Jake Tonjes be a focal point of their offense for a time, and having Ricky Pearsall and other weapons out at the time. But now they are a crutch of sorts. And they are a true disadvantage at this point to you when you lose. But when you're winning, it's going to be made to have Shanahan be praised for what he's doing out there. So it's just a very weird dynamic going on with that. I don't truly understand it, but I digress. For the 49ers in general, with this end to their season, this was a year where they somewhat overachieved. You have all those guys go down, you're not expected to come this far in the playoff picture, and they do deserve a lot of credit for that. Shanahan does deserve his rightful praise for that. I'm not saying he doesn't. What I am saying is that they are still in a scenario where they were feeling, before this season began, as though their Super Bowl window was closing as it was. They've got a good amount of contracts to be dealing with across the offseason. And they've got to find a way, too, because they have so many people already commanding high enough contracts to where they're somewhat limited in what they can truly do to make this team even better. It's an inevitability that they're going to lose some guys. Maybe due to retirement, if you want to look at Trent Williams' way, as people were trying to ask and see if this was his last game or not. And again, until he says anything like that, I don't want to assume anything. But it could be a possibility. So they've got a ton of decisions coming up for themselves. Truly. They should take this into account, because who knows what could happen if your full roster is there. But at the same time, like that going on, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be checked about that, because having players drop left and right, I mean literally Tonjes' knee on live television just gives way as he's just trying to run a route. So something's up. Like that's not something that should be going down. That's all that I'm saying. It's craziness, man. But hey, the Seahawks themselves, with that dominant win, would be awaiting who would win in the next matchup when we get to tomorrow's games. So to start that out, man, we have the Texans and the Patriots for the rights to face off against Denver in the AFC Championship. And well, in a similar way, I think this is just a theme for the games on Sunday. Weather could be considered as a huge factor. There was a bit of a wintry mix, and you would have, as the game progressed, snow start to accumulate throughout the place. But this would make for one of the uglier games you could possibly have, and it was still, again, even with some of the obvious frustrations at what may have been happening, to have a game like that go down in the snow is always nice to watch. Just generally speaking. Like, how can you hate on a snow game, dog? I don't know where that disrespect comes from. That's me personally. Like, there's something beautiful about watching a game unfold in that kind of weather. However, for the teams actually playing on it, you would get some chaos. And I mean a lot of it. Now, it would take a little while. It would. But once we hit that area of the game, we absolutely understood that is what was going on there. Because, man, man. Now, to start it out, you would have a little SEC caliber crumb. Because you would have Hunter Henry go out for a pass, and granted, the Patriots, with this game plan of theirs, they would be doing it anyways. It would amplify with the weather out there. They were going to keep everything short themselves. They're not going to be consistently taking shots, although you would have situations as the game went on where they try to test Kyle Williams against Kamari Lassiter on multiple occasions, and that didn't always end up going so high. Because Kamari Lassiter, again, is truly a great number 2 already in the NFL. So to play that game was a little bold. But in those situations, you know that Hunter Henry's a bit of a safety valve for this team. And in Alabama on Arkansas Crom, you'd have Toto of the Texans deflect one of the passes going his way and limit that game. Ultimately, the Patriots would be able to they would be forced to punt here on this first drive, and the Texans would also get a weird start. You felt, again, the weather was going to have a factor, but it's like, man, this first damn pass kind of said a lot. I'm like, yeah, like Xavier Hutchinson did drop this pass from CJ Stroud, but at the same time, Hutchinson had all the room in the world to work with on that side of the field. There's a fake going to his right, and he's streaking there. Like, he's got a ton of space to run upfield if he needs to. That's how wide open he was. And Stroud just throws it so low to the ground, he has to adjust back to the ball and stun his momentum. The same thing would happen on third down. You just miss Christian Kirk completely. And from that point, you're forced to go on a 3-and-out. So if you're thinking that this was going to be a day where both quarterbacks were lighting it up down the field, you were not getting that. And you saw that on both of their first few drives. However, the Patriots would still find a way to make something happen, as it would be Ramondre Stevenson to get them started on the ground and through the air for some reason to push them in Houston territory, with them ultimately being able to, on fourth down, as you had Kalen Bullock line up on Demario Douglas, he got just enough leverage on him, and Bullock was trying to leap out with his long-ass wingspan to deflect the ball. As they were replaying it, he even got a piece of it. Unfortunately for him, it wasn't enough to deflect the pass, and you would have the shifty, speedy Demario Douglas run his way into the end zone for a 28-yard touchdown catch to open the scoring for this game. This would be a massive problem for the Texans as well, even when you look at them being able to score on this drive. And it did help that Dalton Schultz was able to break loose for essentially a 42-yard gain down the field. I mean, nobody was on him whatsoever. And you have to credit Stroud for being able to make something out of potentially nothing on this play to get them into the Patriots' red zone. But for the most part, you look at all these passes, even when they got in goal-to-goal territory, they had a penalty forced them all the way back to the 6-yard line after Woody Marks initially got a touchdown run on third down. But they had to consistently drop back, because in those situations with plays that actually stood and counted and weren't penalized for anything, they could not run the ball. They couldn't. Now, that's no secret. You know, throughout the entire season, between not having Joe Mixon appear a single time, between having Woody Marks trying to emerge as a pure runner, although he's more of a dual threat back at times, and, trying to get Nick Chubb eased back into the swing of things, with him potentially losing a step after that devastating lower leg injury. They did not have a great unit on the season. That is just not a surprise to anybody watching the game. But at the same time, in the playoffs, that problem was amplified. Because between the likes of Milton Williams and some of the other backers, including Christian Ellis, hard-ass hitter himself, man, they could not get any running lanes to open up at all. It was just porous rushing offense on the entire day. And in a situation where, again, you even have them score, you got offensive line penalties just completely deterring your ability to make something out of that portion of your particular offensive scheme. And it just would not happen. But again, they were down 7-3. They'd get on the board, so there was that at least. And this Texans defense is also just, they're relentless, man. I mean, for a game where, deservedly so, and I mean, hell, we're about to get into that time, right? Because ball security was not a real thing in this game. Both quarterbacks, between Drake May and CJ Stroud, got absolutely fucked up by these respective defenses. Both of them. They had their way with them after a while. Like, you get into a situation where Will Campbell has to fall on the ball at essentially the 3-yard line because Danielle Hunter crept right around the corner to force a fumble on Drake May at that point. And at that particular time, they were forced to punt. But, we can't even go play by play, though. All of this shit is just chaos. Just think about this for a second. You get a near fumble there to pump fake everything a little bit in this first quarter, and then we start getting mad. I just didn't understand, because you had just previously picked up this first down with Nick Chubb, toting it up the middle for that particular purpose. I don't understand why Stroud decided to, on this particular play here, like, he throws it right in Carlton Davis III's direction, and you just completely miss Christian Kirk here. Like, he's got multiple steps on him, he's in the area, but you underthrow it, and you manage to have Carlton Davis III play like a damn wide receiver, pick this interception up to give them their first takeaway of the game. And this would be a struggle from both teams' perspectives as well. Even with some of these turnovers, man, they were not always able to convert on them. Because instantly, you have the Patriots get this, and you have Drake May have to settle for a run on an RPO play because it got completely blown up. In comes the Ohio State man and Tommy Togiai as he's diving to punch that ball straight out of his hands as he's trying to secure the ball and cup it. He ultimately has it funnel to Azeez Al-Shire, and the Texans get the ball right back. Now, luckily for them, on one of the rare occasions in this particular game, they would be able to score on this drive. They were able to push down the field and have Christian Kirk with getting a bit of a physical advantage on Marcus Jones. He went up like this near the boundary, secured the catch perfectly as he elevated, and got his 2 feet down to give them the score to increase their lead to 10-7 and take what would end up being their only win of the game. They had a chance to expand on it. They did. Because to the same extent, even though Drake May was able to kind of nullify that effect at times with his ability to run the football, it's not like Travion Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson were lighting up the world on the ground themselves. They weren't particularly effective. So both teams were doing great in terms of run stopping. However, the struggles through the air would not stop. And it all came because CJ Stroud, I don't know, like, again, yes, he is the Ohio State man. But the commentary and everything surrounding it kind of said as such. Like, it's been clear that, he has taken some steps back over the past few years from his rookie season. That's evident. And injuries did not help him this year, but even when he's been healthy, it has not looked the greatest. And I think this game shows a massive implosion on his end. More than anything. Like, I could talk a lot of shit about it, but at the end of the day, that is a genuine implosion. Like, this man, I kid you not, would go for essentially 4 interceptions in the first half. And one such interception would see him get pummeled to the ground by K'Lavon Chaisson as he tries to throw the ball. So, naturally, when you have that impact going down, that release is going to look wonky. And that's exactly what happened. It was just spinning around in the air like a wobbler for a number of seconds in a row. And ultimately, the dynamic return man in Marcus Jones was able to get in the area, get the ball, and ride Xavier Hutchinson on a tackle attempt all the way into the end zone for an instant pick six that would give the Patriots the ball right back. But it would only get worse. Now, this one is probably not really on CJ Stroud, to be honest with you. Like, yes, this probably could have been lower to the ground, I will say. I'll be picky about it. Xavier Hutchinson had to go extremely high for the pass to catch it in the first place, but he did still get his hands on it. And the fact that he tipped it up on a drop right into the hands of one of the California safeties in Craig Woodson to give them the ball again, like, that is just not something that you can do as a wide receiver. I'll be fair about that one. Bad time to have a tip drill go down. Truly. And again, you have one of those cases where both of the defenses are stout, but obviously the Texans are seen as pretty much one of the best, if not the single best, defensive unit in the NFL. Will Anderson Jr. would get right to work bullying these damn offensive linemen to pummel Drake May in the backfield. And they were forced to punt on a 3-and-out. Didn't come away with anything at all. It's not like the Texans could find their own stretch of offense either, because you had just 3 consecutive incompletions from CJ Stroud to give him the ball right back. Patriots would be able to, with the help of Kayshon Boutte on multiple occasions, being able to get some yards after the catch, surprisingly, although he strikes me as more of a possession guy. He was able to get them down into goal-to-goal territory where Stephon Diggs would haul in a very contested catch, as you had the Penn State rookie in Jalen Reed, and also Kalen Bullock trying to light him up from the other side. He had this ball carried like a baby, essentially, and he reeled it in for the touchdown catch to give them the 21-10 lead, and that would end up standing at halftime, as you would have CJ Stroud throw, essentially, after Carlton Davis unironically handed them a pass interference penalty. He decided to play like a wide receiver again. He was bobbling the ball around, but as he lost control again, he got one foot down, and he stuck that second foot down with technique. That's how they teach you to do it as a wide receiver. 4 damn interceptions, just like that. Just for the fuck of it, you had Drake May also throw a Hail Mary that would result in an interception by Jamarcus Ingram to end off what was truly a chaotic second quarter. Just to think about this shit for a second. Because let's put this in perspective. They tell you all the time that, again, playing a clean brand of ball is always going to get the job done in the postseason. You have to protect the football. You have to preach ball security. That's fair. But at the same time, from the very end of the first quarter on to just the end of the second quarter, you had 6 turnovers in that time. 6 turnovers. And they decided to, in the third quarter, just add to the tally a little bit, because why not? at that point of time, right? Now, they mentioned a few different metrics. I think one that stood out to me the most was that the Patriots would be 24-5 in their home playoff games all time, and this is at the halfway mark. So they had a chance to increase this to 25-5 overall if they honestly kept this up. Like, yeah, they themselves weren't doing that hot on offense either, but for them having that kind of outright advantage in turnover margin and being able to, again, capitalize a little more often on shorter fields, that is what ended up making the difference up in this game for them early on. And for the Texans as well, I mean, it got so bad. Man, you had people trying to play with C.J. Stroud, man. Like, I'm watching the halftime show for this, and I think you have Damian Woody talking about they need to have people go into the locker room and check on C.J. Stroud. Because essentially, he was unsure if mentally he was even really here. And granted, again, playoff jitters can be a real thing. If that was genuinely the case for C.J. Stroud, because again, it had to be something. Like, you just rarely see implosions like that in the NFL work out to the team's benefit in that situation. And it just came in succession of one after another upon another. It was crazy. So something might have been up, but it's like, damn. Yeah, I just like, there may have been something there, but to say that, like, what? That's a little wild. No matter what it was, though, you got to dig deep at that point. The defense is still, again, as people made this point as well, your defense is doing that fucking well. That fucking well. And you are putting them in a situation where they are forced to have to play pretty much flawless football. If not for them being able to make some of these strides on that end, this game could have been much worse, bro. I ain't even gonna lie to you. This game could have been way, way, way worse. From that standpoint, particularly. But they were still managing. They were still fighting. And so if they could clean it up just a little bit, they'd be able to get themselves on the right track, potentially. So to get it started in the second half, they'd immediately get Xavier Hutchinson fed on back-to-back touches. And he would make good on both of them. Although it nearly got chaotic because they thought, for whatever reason, that he lost the fumble and it was overturned at that particular time. But they were able to make that happen. And then, weirdly enough, they weren't too explosive. But they were able to start getting some solid runs going. 7-yard gain, 4-yard gain, 8-yard gain from Woody Marks. They're churning their way down there a little bit. Ultimately, they tried to do the same exact play on third down deep in New England's territory that they pulled off against the Steelers on Monday Night Football last week. And it nearly worked, if not for Marcus Jones being able to extend out and get the well-timed swat to eventually force the Texans to kick a field goal here. You know, I was thinking it would be fourth down territory if they were able to pick up at least a yard. But seeing as it was 4th and 2, you worked way too hard at this point to get down there in the first place, and you've been through enough already. Why not just try to get yourself within a one-possession ball game? Like, there's no need to piss away points if you don't have to. And then you got more chaos. You got more of it because all it took, essentially, was for Will Anderson Jr. to just hit his hand on the ball. And Drake May lost all control of the game at that point. They tried to scramble for it, but Alshire was way too quick, and he would get his second fumble recovery in this game to give the Texans a great chance to tie the game. I would argue that this was probably the drive for them that would end up being the most important one. Like, it's there for the taking. Yes, you'd been through a game where you'd been losing the turnover battle like something crazy. You were not able to run the ball for majority of the game. You had C.J. Stroud struggling. And your defense bought you an opportunity pretty much at New England's 33-yard line at this point. You have an opportunity to get right into the end zone for a touchdown. Even if you don't go for a 2-point conversion. This could be a 1-point ball game. Through all of that struggle, through all of those tribulations. All you have to do in this scenario, if you are Houston, is for the love of goodness, protect C.J. Stroud and protect the ball. Tell me why they failed to do those two things. Because they were able to work themselves out of it. But on the first damn play, the message you send is that you can't block K'Lavon Chaisson. I mean, he got right off the block and into the backfield to pummel C.J. Stroud right into the dirt. At least he was able to utilize a little bit of his running ability on the ensuing 3rd down and 6 after being backed up out of field goal range, potentially, for Ka'imi Fairbairn. But even with them doing that, when it came to putting the ball on the ground, Christian Gonzalez was more than ready to place his own impact on the game. Because as Woody Marks was trying to go low to the ground, Christian Gonzalez punched it out. And Craig Woodson would account for his second takeaway of the game, getting a fumble recovery here. And this is at their 12-yard line. Like, yes, the game wasn't completely over from that point, but that was their finest chance to do something there. And they could not capitalize. Again, both teams had struggled to for the majority of the game, but I mean, like that was the moment that you had to score. You had to come away with something. And you just lose the ball in that situation. At that point, 8 total turnovers had occurred for both sides. And that would mark already, before we were even out of the third quarter, that marked the most in a playoff game since the 2015 NFC Championship game, where the Cardinals and Panthers accounted for, I believe, 8 as well. And just think about that for a second. Because that game, for context, if y'all don't understand, that Panthers Cardinals game in 2016 at that point, that was a 49-15 win by Carolina. Still, which shows you just how great that 2015-16 Panthers defense was. And again, in that ensuing Super Bowl, that promptly came down to turnovers and yada, yada, yada. We understand that. When it came to the Patriots, though, they themselves, they were able to, again, steal their possession back. Their issue as well was 3rd down. And again, another edge to the Texans defense here. They understood that the Patriots wanted to constantly play ahead of the sticks. So what ended up happening for the Patriots in this game? They were met with a unit that held them to 3 of 14 on 3rd down efficiency in this ball game. And for a while, they had teetered right around 8 to 9 yards on average for these 3rd downs. Meaning that you're forcing them into more difficult situations, you're forcing dropbacks, and you're forcing tougher plays overall to execute on this damn team. And that paid off for them. That was most certainly keeping them alive. And it would remain the case as they forced a 3-and-out here, with the Texans having yet another chance to get down the field and potentially get on the board for a touchdown. Yet another bailout with a Carlton Davis III pass interference. But still, they allowed Anthony Jennings, even with him getting hurt on this play, to roam into the backfield for another sack. And they had to settle for a short throw rather. And Fairbairn luckily was able to hit this 50-plus yarder. In the peak of the snow at this point, it was starting to ramp up. Damn crazy, right? 21-16 ball game though. You still do have a chance, admittedly. Again, you have another quarter to go. It's not out of the water just yet. It's a miracle in a way that the game's still that close with you suffering all of those things. But I mean, hey man, like that is definitely crazy to say the least. But I digress. You get into this drive for the Pats though, and it is, man, this is some crazy shit. Because all I gotta say about this is, even with Danielle Hunter getting the sack after an Austin Hooper first down conversion, iron sharpens iron, my nigga. Because Kayshon Boutte and Derek Stingley Jr., even if they may not have been teammates directly, they might have their careers might have intertwined for at least like a year there, but they both played for LSU, okay? And on this drive, they would match up with each other. Oh, man. Let me tell you something. Because they were going at it in this particular sequence. You had Derek Stingley Jr. on the initial third down play, just grabbing Kayshon Boutte the entire time. And they called pass interference as it was being thrown in his direction. Fair enough. Kayshon Boutte took that personally. Because on the next time, another third down, you had Kayshon Boutte get a brief step on Derek Stingley Jr., and that was all he needed. Rarely do the Patriots decide to take these deep shots, but Drake May, when he does have the chance to launch the ball down the field, you're getting nothing but elite ball placement. Once he saw that step, it was go time. And he launches this ball all the way down the field, near the right sideline of the end zone, okay? And Boutte, as Derek Stingley Jr. is trying to recover, he's definitely fast enough to do so. This man leaps out for a one-handed grab, and he snags that shit in with the snow falling, with the camera angles right, and doing him justice. And he hauls in a monstrous touchdown catch from 32 yards out to give themselves a 28-16 lead. Like, that is genuinely going in the highlight reel. You cannot tell me that ain't some cinematic ass shot right there. You can't tell me that. It's fucking beautiful. And it's interesting. It's like Boutte has been on this ascent for the entire season, really. And he'd been through a lot on the field to start out his career. Off the field when it came to that entire gambling stuff with LSU and everything like that. But man, with him, and I guess you could say that Diggs as well might have some influence on that in a positive way, but he's been able to become a sneaky weapon for them. And you have got to respect that. For the rest of the game, though, it was mostly slow. Like, the Texans didn't really do themselves too many favors by, again, not being able to really initiate any sort of control of the rushing attack whatsoever, and they were forced to go 3-and-out on this possession. However, the Patriots, even though this drive would not result in much, this was the kill shot drive. And I said as such. If they could have themselves run the ball or start to run the ball in an effective way and drain out the clock, this would be the drive where they could seal up the game right here. And they did exactly that. Again, no real explosive runs, but 6-yard gain, 9-yard gain, 8-yard gain, etc., and so on, keeping the ball out of harm's way, making sure to protect the ball, having a timely pass go to Stephon Diggs for a first down conversion in the midst of all that. And before you knew it, this clock was being drained down all the way. They get the ball back Yes, the Texans do. But that defense, even with them being that good, and even with them being able to force takeaways, they were put pretty much on ice here. They had to stay out there for pretty much 6 minutes of time as the Patriots just burn as much clock as possible to prevent the Texans from being able to have a truly impactful drive. Like, why would you expect the Texans to be able to get a quick score down the field when on drives that they did not have positive starting field position in, it took them an incredible amount of work to even get down the field, and most times these drives were ending in takeaways or ending in field goals. They just were not productive enough to really warrant that kind of respect. And the Patriots, again, definitely acted in such a manner. Like, you literally had them get after C.J. Stroud yet again, as Khyiris Tonga would get his first sack on the season on this ensuing third down in the damn playoffs, mind you, to force another punt. Ultimately, the Patriots didn't really have to do all that much themselves. They just got it under the 2-minute warning. They forced the Texans to use their last timeout, and they punted it back to them, no problem. Like, it's just genuinely a show of disrespect when you can be able to do that and get away with it. Like, the Texans, at this point, you're in desperation mode, and you're trying to go for deep shots here. They couldn't even get off their own side of the field. And at that point, the Patriots would end the game with a 28-16 win. With that, again, they would improve to 25-5 in home playoff games all time. And they would also become 29-1 all time when leading by 8 or more points in the fourth quarter. I'm thinking that could be the regular season, or just generally speaking, maybe specifically in the playoffs. I don't know. They didn't make that aspect of the stat clear for some reason. But nonetheless, that's still a show of domination from the Patriots. In this game, Drake May had 179 passing yards along with 3 touchdowns and an interception, along with, on his own end, 4 fumbles and 2 lost on 59.3% completion percentage. One of the worst games by that standpoint for a man who I think did, again, become the first to lead it at age 20, or first to lead the league at age 24 or younger in completion percentage in more than a few decades now. As I mentioned in a previous recap. Definitely a stark turn of events for him. But you can say that on your end, you still got the job done. And again, the Patriots defense also deserves far more respect than they do get. Yes, the Texans are the much better unit, but it's not like the Patriots have been bad all season long. Like they have a solid core of players to rely upon. Like, they're dangerous in their own right. So you definitely need to get that shored up. The team as a whole would rush for 105 yards, with Ramondre Stevenson having 70 on the ground. Keyshawn Boutte had 3 receptions for 75 yards and a touchdown, and Stephon Diggs had 4 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown. Demario Douglas also had 2 receptions for 36 yards and a score. And the defense overall forced 3 sacks, as we talked about, 4 interceptions, 6 tackles for loss, and 14 passes deflected. That shit is crazy, man. Carlton Davis III himself accounted for 4 of them. Truly a defensive masterclass. And it only barely one-upped what the Texans were able to do on their front. But by them having that many turnovers and just losing those kinds of little battles in those specific situations on the field, they lost this game. And you are going to look at C.J. Stroud and say that. I mean, oh man. Like, jeez, bro. As I, was hearing while watching the game myself, bruh, You could slice up this stat line in a number of different ways, and it's going to look bad every single time. At its base, CJ Stroud, there's no denying that this was just a horrible game. 212 fucking passing yards and a touchdown, along with 4 interceptions, a 28 quarterback rating, and a 42.6% completion percentage on 47 pass attempts. 47 pass attempts. And I mean, hell, people would be right if they are questioning, why the fuck is he dropping back that many times in a wintry mix? Oh yeah, it's because they genuinely couldn't run the ball. Like, even the Patriots, with them being ineffective, they were able to come away with something. No rusher on this team ran for more than 17 yards, and it was Woody Marks only running for 1.2 yards per fucking carry. And the team as a whole, 22 rushes for 48 fucking yards, man. When is that ever going to get the job done in a playoff game? Absolutely not. So you can see why they'd abandon that and have to rely on CJ Stroud. And it turned out to be a terror for them. You'd want to do it for a guy that you drafted that high in the draft and that you believe in like this. But it would not be paid forward. Not even close. To break it up into a different, aspect here. Under pressure. And believe me, the eye test will even tell you. Patriots were consistently getting after his ass. So you don't necessarily need a number to tell you that. But just think about this. I had to get this again. They didn't even show this on the game. But under pressure, CJ Stroud completed just 20% of his passes, had 30 passing yards, had 2 interceptions, and was sacked 3 times. Now again, you're not going to have many quarterbacks succeed in situations where they're getting their asses blitzed like that. But at the same fucking time, bro. I mean, yo. At a point with CJ Stroud, again, the Texans have been in the playoffs every year that DeMeco Ryans has been there, and they have won at least a playoff game in each of these years. You have to have some idea of the fact that they are more than likely going to send pressure your way. And I'm not saying that you're going to be fucking Matthew Stafford in those kinds of scenarios with the way that he'd been able to perform against the blitz overall this season. I'm not saying that you're going to be that accurate. But, you have got to protect the football in a much better way. And there's got to be some general improvement there. And that's what this is going to come down to for the Texans, really. The defense, man. They themselves forced 5 sacks, had 9 tackles for loss, and also had 6 pass deflections. So they themselves objectively did great on their own end. But having that many turnovers, and with them not even being able to convert on those in the same way that they did in the Steelers game with multiple return touchdowns on a fumbled 6 and an interception to end the game with Kalen Bullock getting in there. It's like they just would come short here. It's going to be tough, man. There's going to be a lot to evaluate in the offseason. And while I think they are probably going to look a little bit into CJ Stroud and question some things, people were mentioning that it was likely, and even Adam Schefter said himself on Get Up, that he probably thinks it's likely they'll pick up his 5th-year option. I would probably think so too. Because you can't have performances like that. The entire postseason saw him account for essentially damn near 10 turnovers by himself. And even if you won one, it's like that is just an ugly stretch of play. When we need you to be locked in, we can't have you doing that in high-stakes ball games. The regular stuff, in the regular season, I should say, could be all right, but you cannot get away with performing like that in the postseason. So maybe they owe it to themselves to see for at least another year whether or not, he is going to maintain that level of excellence and at least get back to some of what he was doing in his rookie season to suggest otherwise. Because right now, he is still their franchise player. I don't think there's any doubt about that, but they could be in flux. And I mean, hell, when you look at some of the other guys here, good point to note as well, some of these other guys are about to get paid. If Will Anderson Jr. is on the market to get a contract in this time, he's getting the fucking bag, and there's no doubt about it. As potentially it's so hard in a league where you have edge rushers just spilling over at this point with talent. We are just overflowing at that specific position with top-end talent. And yet Will Anderson Jr. is quickly making his case throughout the first few seasons he's been in the league of being at least one of the top 10 in the game overall. So, again, if he's up for a contract, he's getting the fucking money. Kamari Laster as well is probably a guy that could be looking for a contract soon. I believe that Derek Stingley Jr. already has his. Jalen Petre already has his, deservedly so. So, some of those things are figured out, but, man, with the personnel that you have, it may get a little more difficult to potentially keep everybody in that situation. And so they're going to have to make that decision. But I would also think about some of the personnel here. And I'm not going to lie, I don't know so much about Nick Caley being their offensive coordinator. Now, that's just me personally. Nobody's brought that up at all, I don't believe. But I feel like they could use a change there. Or at least they owe it to themselves to consider it, even if they don't go in a different direction from him. I would just look into some things. You have some solid offensive coordinator talent on the market. And maybe one of the things that could be working against CJ Stroud is the fact that, Slowick, I will say that Bobby Slowick did kind of just trend downwards as the season went along. But especially in the rookie season, he was there when CJ Stroud had that kind of success. And again, I'm not saying that you would hire him back or anything like that. But I am saying that you might want to try and see if this is a matter of system compared to CJ Stroud just being a terrible performer outright. No matter what, though, the Texans, after a tremendous season, they won 10 games in a row before this point to even make the playoffs in the first place. After being a 2-5 team. Mind you. So, that in and of itself is impressive. But they could not advance to the AFC Championship game. In fact, they are the only team since 1970 to not appear in any championship game. And yes, they are a recent expansion team, but still, the only one since that time to not do it. And they were close. They had a genuine chance. It's not like this was a complete and total blowout. They were in the fight for the majority of this game. And they just could not get it done. It's incredibly unfortunate for them. Incredibly unfortunate. Now the Patriots, with this win, would claim their right to face off against the Broncos in the AFC Championship game. They would be facing off against them as well, unironically, in the same way that they did 10 years ago. Because Pat's Broncos, with Brady and a banged-up Manning, was the matchup in 2016. And ultimately, with the strength of that defense, they were sent to the Super Bowl off of that. Now, could that go the same way with Jarrett Stidham being at the helm on the Broncos end? I don't know, but that defense is scary. So that's still, even if you think that you might have easy pickings here, if you are New England, you could also be falling into a trap. Like, I don't care if Stidham is a backup quarterback. It's playoff football. And, I don't want to do the whole prediction thing, but I can guarantee you that Sean Payton, is going to try to keep Jarrett Stidham out of harm's way. He's not going to ask him to do too much in that game. Like, there may be times where he takes shots because he's talked a little highly about Jarrett Stidham over this time, and maybe you're just trying to hype him up. That could be an aspect of that there. But, for the most part, man, I don't expect him to do anything too over the top in that ball game. And if the Broncos do get J.K. Dobbins back, that could change up a lot about how they end up running that offense, potentially through him and his strengths. Not so much necessarily focusing on Jarrett Stidham here. But the Patriots as well, again, are to be watched out for defensively. So that could be a very interesting matchup. And then we get to this game between the Rams and the Bears. Wow. Just wow. To start it out from that perspective. To start out with context for this game, I did, good amount of time before watching this go down, I did see a video on NFL Throwback about the 1986 NFC Championship game between these same two teams. As one of the only two times prior to this, they also faced off against each other in 1950 in the playoffs. And that game, with that dynamic-ass Bears defense through that 85-86 season, the Rams at that time did not stand a chance at all. Even with them still having Eric Dickerson at this point, they didn't even compete in that game. It was a beatdown. That offense was shut down, and the Bears were able to win that game to advance to the Super Bowl and do even more damage, even greater damage to the Patriots in that particular game. This game was going to be a little different in that both of these teams enter this game as two of the best overall in the regular season, and they honestly have compelling stories in their own ways. Matthew Stafford, of course, for the Rams is on pace for potentially his first ever NFL MVP, depending on how voters carry out those ballots and, entries through a number of different media. And with the way that both of these teams play, even though the Rams would have an advantage in, their receiving core, Nakua obviously being one of the best in the NFL and Devontae Adams just being an elite fucking red zone threat, the Bears are not to be outdone on their own front, as they have, like the Rams do, a pair of reliable running backs to spur that part of their offense, which they'd want to get going early and often as far as this game is concerned. Defensively, the Bears have been a lot weaker over the course of the entire season, and we know how it had been for them over the past few weeks. But it's not like they don't have reliable players on that front. And I think that when it comes to those guys, yes, Kevin Byard, the third, would probably be at the helm with accounting for 7 interceptions of the many takeaways they were able to force as the top unit amongst all defenses in takeaways, specifically on the year. And with the way that some of this is going, if they could force Matthew Stafford into a few mistakes, this game could go a number of different ways for them. But to get it started, it's not going to help if you are willing to give those away yourself. I mean, it started all great. You had DJ Moore instantly get right over the field. They decided for whatever reason to have Nate Landman guarding him, even if it was his own, and they fucked up tremendously. He was able to streak wide open and get himself a 34-yard gain down the field instantly. Now, they were stuffed a little bit, and that's credit to the Rams for being able to hold up after an explosive play like that. But I just didn't understand how some of these were going, and I think this would be a theme for pretty much the entire game here. The fourth downs, just spamming them over and over and over again. And not only that, but just being unwise with some of the decisions here. Like Caleb Williams on this one, for example, to start it out, seeing as it's the first one of this game. Like, you just overshoot Colston Loveland by a mile, and granted, I mean, credit to the Rams for actually watching film, noticing that he was going to be their main target in these situations. But you miss him by that much, and you have Jacoby Durant get his first interception on you in this game. Pretty much a freebie at that point, as he manages to get some extra yardage out of it while almost being pinned back. And granted, keep an emphasis on the very first one. Like, it would not be the last time at all. Just signify how crazy that is. But the Rams, even though it could have been rough for them, seeing as this was uncharted territory for them, Stafford, prior to this point, had never played in a game that was 20 degrees or below before kickoff. Yes, they did play in a blizzard, essentially, in the game against the Eagles last year, and damn near came out on top in this one. But as far as this game is concerned, they started out their first drive in the exact way that they wanted it. Attacking Chauncey Gardner-Johnson specifically through the air. And I like, you literally couldn't make it up. Pretty much every receiver that lined up against him, Puka Nacua for some reason even got multiple reps against him. And I'm like, at that point, you have Kyler Gordon back. Can you just stop playing him in the slot? Put somebody else on him, because you know that they're going to constantly run this motion to try to get Puka Nacua in a much better spot to operate. And it's coming your way every single time. And there was nothing he could do about it. He's just getting worked up and down the field by himself at that point. And ultimately, they were able to parlay that into a touchdown by Kyren Williams to get the scoring started in this game. But the Bears responded accordingly with a similar drive. That was going to be the key. You know, are they going to be able to convert in the red zone? And are they going to be able to keep a dynamic offense like the Rams have been for most of the season? Are they going to be able to keep them at bay and on the sidelines to remain cold? As far as this drive was concerned, yes. Luther Burden III and Olamide Zaccheaus would contribute to a couple of catches to get them down the field. And it would be Kyle Monangai with his efforts, including bowling Emmanuel Forbes Jr. over like a fucking ragdoll. I'm telling you, in that situation, bro, he essentially just made him his bitch. Like, they introduce these players with their player intros and everything like that on the defensive side of the ball as this drive gets underway. And he had the nerve to call himself the king of the fucking South. As cringe as that was, I think I would not ever believe that any king would get himself lit the fuck up like that. And it just shows you yet again the build that Monangai has. Like, again, you're not expecting that. But again, with him being more of a compact guy, having that kind of strength and muscle in that smaller frame, and he got low, and he drove that shoulder in his chest, that's going to provide some pop every time. And Emmanuel Forbes Jr. wasn't ready for it. It was actually to the point where he would be out for the rest of the game with a shoulder injury after that. And they had to have the former Ram, then turned Jag, then now a Ram again for the second stint, in Darius Williams to play out there in his place. Nevertheless, even with all that being said, they'd stuff him on the go-to-go situation, and it would be in the hands of Caleb Williams to go for it again. If you're going to live by the fourth down, you're going to die by it, and this would be one of the situations where it ended up working. He was able to work a pass right over Omar Speights as he was backing up, tried to reach his arms out and get the deflection, and it got just over the fingertips, and Moore was able to haul in a 3-yard touchdown catch to tie the ball game at that particular point. The majority of these drives were just strange. And it's like, one thing that was working well for the Bears, man, Like, they were able to get pressure on Matthew Stafford, and they got him in scenarios where, I shit you not, on back-to-back drives, they were able to force a near interception on him. First damn play, he sends it in double coverage to the rookie and Terrence Ferguson, and you have Byard the third in position to get an interception, and he doesn't, but they force a 3-and-out there. This next drive, they force a sack fumble on him, and Kyron Williams manages to get his hands on it. And I think these are situations, even though you did have some good work from this Bears defense, those are situations that you'd want back in a game that would get this chaotic. Because the Bears themselves, in the overall scheme of things, they would lose the turnover margin in this game. And those were a pair of opportunities where the defense, with as prolific as they've been in long game takeaways all season long, Stafford was under duress like that to where he was essentially handing you a few free turnovers, which may rarely happen for him, but it's not so far removed from his game that you can't make him work to your benefit at times, and they let him get away with that. And ultimately, that would be a very tough stretch for them. The Bears themselves would have a 3-and-out as well. But like I said, overall, it was good for this Bears defense. Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker especially, they were so glad to have both of those guys back, and they were getting everywhere. I mean, between them being able to force multiple incompletions with pass deflections throughout this entire game, and Jaquan Brisker as well also being able to get in the backfield, along with Kyler Gordon on a few occasions, to put pressure on Matthew Stafford, get a couple of sacks on him. Not to mention his ass in run support. There was a play where he comes down, again, this same drive before that sack fumble even takes place, he creeps into the backfield, running all the way from the safety position and hustling his ass off to stop Kyron Williams for no gain. You just can't make that shit up. And again, coming out of Penn State, that versatility is what made him a second-round pick in the first place. Now, it took a while for him to string that together, but, it seems like he's starting to emerge as that caliber of player right now. And it makes him incredibly dangerous. He's a 6'4" safety, but he can do all those things while having that kind of strength and speed on him. It's truly a weapon to rely upon. And it kept this game very low scoring. The Bears would be able to break that, though, as Rome Odunze would start out this particular drive getting deep for a 27-yard gain, and ultimately being forced to settle for a field goal after that point, as the run game would slow up. But the Rams themselves, in essentially a 2-minute drill, would have to get down the field very quickly. And again, this situation where you have them in a 2nd and 3 on their own side of the field, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson legitimately allows Tyler Higbee, of all people, to break away from him and get a 27-yard gain down the field. It's fucking ridiculous the amount of times this man just gets cooked. I don't understand what Gervon Dexter Sr. was doing here either. Like, they'd already made the tackle, and this man, for whatever reason, just decided to shove one of the offensive linemen, bought them some extra yards to where they could take shots and potentially take a touchdown on the board if there was a good look. And they did not, fortunately for them, so they would be tied 10-10 at this point. The third quarter was pretty much more of the same in that particular regard. I mean, the Bears at least were able to run the ball a little bit, but they were not able to finish their jobs. And even with the Rams, you had Matthew Stafford getting to get another situation where they forced a sack fumble on him and he recovered his own shit. But it was all chaotic for him, and you have people questioning what was going on. There was yet another scenario where he just missed the hell out of Puka Nacua. And again, that rarely happens with those two. Even if you want to consider weather being a factor, it's definitely something that shows you the impact that this Bears defense had on this team for a while. Like, even if they weren't forcing takeaways, again, the ability to rattle him was doing more than enough. And it bought the Bears time and multiple opportunities in this game to get something to go. Yet in a field position battle, even with being forced back deep at that time, the Bears still couldn't get it done. Like Caleb Williams, again, accuracy is one thing, but we know from his time at USC and with the plays that we've seen across this season that he can be exceptional on the run. Foreshadowing. He can be exceptional in that regard. However, I don't understand what his decision was here. Like, he was trying to extend the play, and he rolls all the way out to the sideline. Looking for, I believe it was, in this situation, yeah, like he literally tested Jacoby Durant on an earlier pass in Rome Odunze's direction on this damn drive. And he nearly got picked off there. So why is it that pretty much on the next play, after a penalty, he tests him again on the run, and Durant promptly got the fucking ball for his second interception against him on the night to give the Rams a much shorter field to work with. Luckily for the Bears defense, with another misfire in Apikanakua and other players, they would not move an inch. They forced an instant 3-and-out, and they were able to force a touchback as well. So they were still smooth sailing, seemingly, until they weren't. Because with Jarrett Verse and Nate Landman crashing in from the rafters for the tackle for loss on Munengai, they would be forced to punt yet again. With the Rams being able to finally wake up and take it upon themselves to zap all the energy out of this team. They went on a damn 6-minute drive pretty much at the start of the fourth quarter, getting Kyron Williams to start it off with some runs, and ultimately, through a number of different contributions through the air, it would be Kyron Williams, of all people, after that was said and done, to run into the end zone. And also stiff arm Jalen Johnson a little bit on his way there, while leaping in for a 5-yard rushing touchdown to give the Rams a 17-10 lead. This sequence by the Bears would end up being tough as this game was going on. Now, I don't know what their decision was to start this drive out, though, because they tried to target Benedict, the backup lineman, again. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, Caleb Williams in this situation, and this would be the same case for some of these sport downs, too, and some of these other plays in general. Caleb Williams was able to make plays out of the backfield with his legs. I don't know what his option was, what his thinking was about, to try to throw it to an offensive lineman when he had an angle to run for a number of yards on that particular play. And it's infuriating at times because the next one you'd see him shake up Landman and veer all the way down the left sideline for a 26-yard gain. Like that, with a scrambling lane. So you see that going down, but then you have that play before, you have him on these fourth downs and other plays just standing in the pocket when nothing's there and just trying to force stuff up. It does not make any sense, especially if they're giving you room to run. But I digress. They would parlay that into being able to pick up a first down and also get bailed out on an and one with Ramadenze hauling in a catch and having Jarrett Verse rough the passer as well on the play. He hit him extremely late, I'm not going to lie. The Rams at this point, they were being put on an extreme defensive, and they needed a goal line stand. They would promptly get it. You go low, I go high. Damn. This man, Darius Williams, set up DeAndre Swift for the slimiest fucking hit imaginable. Because he went for the low tackle and forced DeAndre Swift to try to pull off a hurdling maneuver. Quentin Lake, who has recently returned to this Rams team, he would pretty much catch him in the air and slam him down to the ground. And that was on third down, mind you. That's a clutch-ass stop. But they needed another one on fourth down to keep it going. And promptly, Caleb Williams again, rather than potentially try to make something happen on a run And you don't want to be that predictable to go for one straight up like they did on an earlier fourth down. I understand that. But to try to thread this in between two different players for the Rams, and Spates, again, wasn't even fooled by it. You didn't distract them enough to make this pass work. And Spates was able to get a hand in there, knock it out, and force the turnover on down. Now, the Rams at this point, if they had picked up a multitude of first downs, they could have ended this game. And it was looking like disaster as you had Kyren Williams started out with a 10-yard run on 2nd and 8. However, he was out of bounds at that point. And thankfully for the Bears, it conserved them a timeout. But this sequence would be pretty fucking smart. Because you had Kevin Byard III make a damn play, barrel right into the backfield as the box was loaded, and force a tackle for loss. And at that point, the Rams had a number of different options at their disposal. The Bears as well could have called a timeout, but smartly they didn't. To that point, they still had two, and they let the clock run down all the way. Just let them do exactly what they were going to do. And they had about 2 minutes and 13 seconds left on the clock when they snapped it again. And this time, Kyren Williams will be stopped once more, with them then deciding to call a timeout at the 2:07 mark. Now, with a third down, same thing. You think they're going to pass, and you're like, there's no way. They do run commit, and promptly they get the jump on Kyren Williams to keep his gain short, forcing them into the 2-minute warning and saving the Bears a free timeout. This has been the Bears' forte all season long. These first three quarters had not been up to par for them, but they'd been in the fight. We know the damage that they've been doing in the last 2 minutes of ball games. Two teams across the entire league to the Packers last week. And there was just something in the air. The cold and brisk Chicago air. And a starry night under the lights, man. And they found a way to do it again. Peak fucking cinema, by the way. Because they drive and they're getting into territory in pretty much the same way that they've been doing this for the 6 times in the regular season in the game against the Packers last week. Same way. They can balance it out with passes, and they got a brief run from DeAndre Swift to get it pretty much in the red zone because they could afford to do it with a timeout on the docket. They didn't have to rush. They didn't have to conform to a different playing style forced by their opponents. If anything, one could argue that, people have been saying, and even the broadcast team alluded to the fact that Caleb Williams may just generally be made for these moments. Maybe it's that they tend to play a lot looser in these situations. And from my observation, one could view that as a bad thing. But in reality, for this Bears team, with the chaos that they've been able to create by doing what they've done, it's like maybe not so much from their end. And when you have that kind of stress going down, it's kind of impossible to really put it into words. Exactly like this play right here. Because the Rams, to their credit, they get deeper into the red zone, but they force back-to-back incompletions. It all comes down after they call a timeout to 4th and 4 from the 14-yard line. You have no other choice but to pick this up. You could get a first down and call a timeout, or you could go for the touchdown the whole way. You could not afford a loss of yardage. You could not force a negative. You cannot allow a negative play. You could not have an incompletion go down if you are on the Bears side of things. You had to find a way to convert this. And the Rams were not shying away from what they were trying to do. They blitzed the living hell out of Caleb Williams on this play. You had him having to run straight back at that point. That's how bad it was. And all of a sudden, at that point of time, because at that point, you're not really going to have a lot of success. Jared Verse and Stewart as well, those guys are coming for him. And they are not slowing down whatsoever. They're inching closer and closer and closer to him. And so at that point, he backs up a little more to try to buy himself some time. He has no other choice after a while to fire a rocket down the field as Stewart and Verse leap up into the air to try to alter the pass. The ball rotating around in all the conditions with the damn precipitation falling. Rotating around, peaking in the air, reaching an inordinate amount of hang time. It felt, for that point, watching it in real time, like that shit was hanging around there for at least 5 seconds or so. And ultimately, what goes up must come down. That's science, right? It starts to fall down. And you're thinking, there's no way as the camera pans over, there's no shot in hell that there's somebody wide open in the end zone. Oh my gosh, Cole Kmet beat Jacoby Durant, a man who had been getting Caleb Williams' number all night long. And even if they want to call it a push-off, even McCauley got on there and mentioned that it probably wasn't going to be called. They're both going for the football in that situation. That's just grown man strength from Cole Kmet. He was able to get himself open on a perfect pass that you had to see to believe in real time. It is just mind-breaking that they've done this repeatedly throughout the year. And when they had to have it against a daunting Rams opponent, they fucking did it again. And they score the touchdown. People were saying, and people also, with the way that this game ended, they're talking about I would have gone for a 2-point conversion in this situation. In real time, I was saying you didn't have to. The way that the overtime rules are, with both teams getting a shot to have the football in overtime, there's no point of potentially not getting the 2-point conversion and just losing the game outright. Just fight to see another possession that is guaranteed now. Like, don't put yourself in that scenario. And they wouldn't. They would kick the PAT and tie up the ball game to send it to overtime. We started it out with an overtime game, and we're ending this divisional round with an overtime thriller. And man, say what you want when it comes to the revisionist history aspect of things. With all those people, again, talking about that, as I mentioned. But the Bears were able to force an early 3-and-out. They were able to have the likes of Grady Jarrett and Nahshon Wright initially get Blake Corum in the backfield here. And then he just funneled those guys down, essentially, to Kevin Byard III and also Jervon Dexter Sr. in those situations. And with that third down stop, they got the ball back. I am saying throughout the entire time, if you're the Bears, high percentage looks. Play your brand of football. You don't need to force anything. You don't need to get it all in one play. You just got to keep moving forward. You can't keep on suffering negative losses of plays. And even when they did, they were able to overcome them at times. They were doing so well to start this out. They even had Caleb Williams on this 4th down play pick it up by smartly not going straight ahead for the sneak, but finding the different gap, an open one at that, to run through and then fall forward for a 3-yard gain. All they had to do was keep on running the ball and favoring shorter passes. So it makes this situation even more unexplainable. Because if you're the Bears' perspective, and I guess I could expand on this further when looking at them specifically, they fucking had it, man. They had it. All you have to do is keep the ball out of harm's way. And Caleb Williams, look, the team as a whole, they are the comeback kids. And they have taken gamble after gamble after gamble across the entire year. But y'all know what they say when it comes to these damn situations. No matter how much money you may gain in these kinds of scenarios, with the kind of input in terms of overall capital, in terms of funds and everything like that, that you may put into these kinds of games and everything like that, or into these kinds of parlays when dealing with sports books and things like that. And there's a point to what I'm saying. The house always wins. The house always fucking wins. And for the Bears, it did not have to here. That's the crazy thing about it. It always wins. But they had the method. They had the opportunity they needed to avoid something like that even happening. Yet, with their own error, with their own, in a way, maybe you could call it bloated confidence in being able to pull this stuff off and get away with it that much, you still have to be smart in these situations, because you just can't mistake that kind of risk and get so addicted to it. This play is exactly what that comes down to. Caleb Williams got greedy. Like, I don't know if this is a true miscommunication on DJ Moore or not, but I know that you don't even need to attempt a situation where you are throwing the ball that damn deep, and you have any potential for any Rams player, with it being Cameron Curl here, to pick this ball off. As I watched the play in post as well, there may have been a way for him to get this ball in a little earlier to DJ Moore. I think he got scared off by one of the linebackers trying to feign as if he was going to make a play on the football. But that was probably your best bet to make that play work. Even then, you could run the ball if you're Ben Johnson in this situation, and for whatever reason you choose not to take the much more preferred route in this situation. You don't have to go with the high risk scenario here. There's very low reward to it, and you got the worst possible outcome. Caleb Williams as well owns blame on this play overall, much further than the interception, because again, for the same reason that I've been alluding to this entire time, like, why not use your legs? Like, he, again, as I've said, he's been able in this game to scramble out and make some plays out of the backfield as a runner. So this situation was no different, where there wasn't really any pressure coming his way. It was all up the middle, and with him being able to get out in space, these defenders weren't even really that fast enough to keep up with him. There didn't even appear to be a spy anywhere. So he had room to run. And even if there was, you may have the angle you need to still pick up a first down anyways, or still get a reasonable amount of yardage to get a manageable third down. Don't put the ball in harm's way. That's all you have to do. Like, this defense, you know, although neither quarterback was able to finish with elite accuracy, they did not sack Caleb Williams a single time in this ballgame. Like, I think sometimes with some of these quarterbacks, and granted, it is a mind game at the end of the day, the pressure at times, the idea of it, can scare off a quarterback from their normal game plan. But a lot of these can be bluffs just to throw you off your game. And recognizing that, you don't take advantage of that and use your next potential asset here to just run. I don't get it. And that is something that they're going to have to be thinking about for a good amount of time in a row, because that effectively ended their opportunities, any they had at that point, to advance to the next round. Like, I'm saying defensively, if you're the Bears, you gotta try to force an interception. Now would be the time. But no, Matthew Stafford hit the fucking Zen, who was in a deep zone at that point. And the Bears instantly allow them to get into field goal range, with Harrison Mavis eventually ending the game with a game-winning field goal, I should say, to get the 20-17 win for the Los Angeles squad. Tough. So, for the numbers here, Matthew Stafford would have 258 yards on 47.6% completion. 47.6% completion. Like, that's a tremendous job on him from the Bears' defensive perspective. But the thing about him, again, even though he got away with some, especially when you look at that last drive, he capitalized on Caleb Williams being over-aggressive in that situation and just spoiling what was a really great opportunity for this Chicago team. Like, ultimately, making too many mistakes against Matthew Stafford and the squad, especially in a high-stakes scenario like this, it's going to be difficult for a team to overcome that. And hell, I'm talking after what went down on Thursday Night Football in the second part of this season series between these two squads. Crazy. Kyron Williams would have 87 rush yards on 4.1 yards per carry and 2 scores. And Pikanaka would have 5 receptions for 56 yards, while Colby Parkinson would also have 3 receptions for 56 yards in this game. Cameron Curl and Nate Landman also had more than 10 tackles each, with Cameron Curl accounting for 13. They did have 9 pass deflections throughout the entire game, though. The Rams did. And as I mentioned, they forced 3 interceptions, with Jacoby Durant accounting for 2 and Cameron Curl getting the last one, as I mentioned. And with that, the Seahawks would have to face off against the Rams for the 3rd time this season in the championship game. Again, I am not doing the prediction thing, but I got faith in my fucking team. Is what I'm going to tell you right now. I got faith in my damn team. Like, yes, everybody's going to try to push this narrative about Sam Darnold struggling against the Rams, about him having all of these turnover problems against the Rams. Oh, he's there, his kryptonite and everything like that. Do you understand that even with all those turnovers in place, this season series has been so close, with the Seahawks having a great chance of winning both of those games? It took a Jason Myers missed field goal from 61 yards, with him being one of the best kickers in the NFL, to lose that one, despite that stretch of 4 interceptions from the man. And then that legendary Thursday night thriller goes without saying, because Sam Darnold, even with that happening, was still able to bounce back in that game and get the win in overtime for the fucking dagger and the 1 seed. Both teams are here anyways. So all those guys that were complaining about the correct call that Charbonnet picked up the fumble on, right? That was a correct call. Everybody wants to talk about how fluky it was. Well, now you have a chance, if you are the Rams in this perspective, to go ahead, prove it. Prove it then. Prove that was a fluke. Both of these teams are legit, so I have no doubt it's going to be a good game. But all I can say is this. The Bears were the most prolific team in takeaways on the year and allowed Matthew Stafford to get away with multiple turnovers in this game. Now, again, the Rams are a much stronger team than the 49ers would be on both sides of the ball. Special teams has been an issue. And I didn't even mention, I was remiss to mention the horrible punt that Ethan Evans had to set up the Bears game tying drive to send it to overtime in the first fucking place. That shit was atrocious. Like, that's a totally different story. But I digress. Look, even if these are completely different teams, let the Seahawks be able to get out to a hot start. Let the Seahawks be able to finally get themselves in a situation where they win the turnover battle against this team. Let them be in a situation where they actually force Matthew Stafford into mistakes. Because if you don't understand how the last game went, yes, it was a through and through offensive shootout. But the second half and overtime combined saw Matthew Stafford get completely pressured by this defensive unit. Completely pressured. All I'm saying is y'all gotta stop playing like they have absolutely no chance to take down the Rams again. Because if they have lost a turnover margin in both games and have still made the overall season series that close in terms of total points, if they were able to come back and win in overtime despite doing this, you're not always expecting them to have a completely clean ball game in the playoffs. But if they somewhat replicate that again, can you really sit there and tell me that the Rams have still got a much better chance to come out of this game victorious if they're doing that on that offensive side of the ball and potentially forcing Matthew Stafford into mistakes? Now, again, it could be the same thing from a different perspective if you're a Rams fan. That's how cinematic the games have been. So it should definitely be a battle. But I got faith in my fucking team, bro. We're not doing that. We will definitely be able to avenge and do what the Bears could not in that situation. Because if Matthew Stafford is forced to have a game where he's completing 47.6% of his passes against this Seahawks defense, and they are actually legit, whereas the Bears have been struggling down the stretch of the season. Try that shit against this Seahawks defense. Try it. From my standpoint, though, the main thing is just, again, it'll be harder with having Devontae Adams back. So, again, you can look at this from the same perspective if you are a Rams fan in this scenario. Fair enough. All I'm saying is, Seahawks, no matter what you got to do, you cannot allow Pucanacqua to replicate the game that he had against this damn team. You can't allow him to replicate that. That's all I'm saying. Like, 225-yard night on 12 catches is still fucking crazy. And it is by far the lone blemish on this defense for pretty much most of the season, especially over the last half. The lone blemish. You can't allow anything like that to happen again. Not in this scenario. Not with a potential Super Bowl appearance on the line. Like, at the very least, if he is, because again, they're probably going to account for Jackson Smith and Jigba in the same way, and he was still able to put on that masterclass in the second half in overtime of the game. So they're probably going to do some similar things in terms of game planning for him. But all I'm saying is if that is how it is going to go, and they're both going to get theirs, they gotta earn it. They gotta earn it. Make them earn every yard. Don't allow them all these free shots down the field. Don't allow them all these free curl routes to have Pucanacqua extend different plays after the catch and things like that. You gotta make him work for this shit. You can't hand it to him for free. So that should be interesting, all things considered, even with what I'm saying here. As for the Bears, man, it has been a great season for them, despite all of that. Caleb Williams had 257 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions in this game on 54.8% completion from the field. And again, it is an interesting dynamic. Man has legitimately been a player in the regular season who has been risk averse throughout his first couple of years. So the fact that overall in this playoff run, he's combined for this many turnovers says a lot. And my thing is, with that, it is stuff that can be learned in time. Those are bad habits that can be broken. You know, it's his first time in the playoffs. And as they continue to get exposed to this kind of setting, I believe that he will learn. I do. You know, this season overall under Ben Johnson was a massive, massive success, and that cannot be understated. But still, it's like that recklessness has got to be figured out. Again, Ben Johnson is now a part of the Dan Campbell tree. We understand that, again, in that, you're going to constantly go for it on fourth down. But, man, if you just legitimately take your points at some times, and on that last drive especially, bro, you don't need to rush anything. The next scorer is going to win in that scenario because you stopped the Rams in this case. And you were granted a guaranteed possession to go down there and just take the lead in any way. You didn't need it all in one fell swoop. Like, take your time. You're good. You're in field goal range already. Just take the points if you got to take the points. You can't constantly keep living like that and expect to succeed. Like, some of the gambles, yes, can pay off. But again, in situational football, it pays to be smart. And the Rams were able to capitalize on that kind of brash mentality by just being smarter than the Bears were in those moments. And that cost them big time. I think as well, too, I will say, as I was watching something yesterday, I think Dan Orlovsky did make a good point. In that, you know, this record is heavily fluctuated, heavily by the amount of times that it took you to come back to win these games. He mentioned that in the first 3 quarters of these games combined across all of these matches over the season, they were trailing by 19 points overall. Like, yes, we'll say, hey, that, you know, all that matters at the end of the day is the score at the end of the game and not necessarily what goes into it at times for those guys that are just, you know, potential box score watchers and more casual fans of the game. But, you know, from the front office perspective, he does have a point in that you have to understand how exactly you got there in the first place. And this team, even though they got to this point, does still need work. They do. You can't be content with that. It's good to see that happen, and it, again, is cinematic to see that happen on a repeat. But you can't be content with that at all. You've got to shore up something. You got to shore up some things to make sure that even though it may take comebacks to, you know, win a few games out there, you at the very least are controlling a game at some point through the first 3 quarters rather than having to battle back and just play completely different ball games from quarters 1 through 3 and then split into quarter 4 and then finally look like the team that just went on this kind of crazy streak throughout the season. Because, again, to be trailing by 19 throughout the entire year, and we're not taking into account, you know, how the range of some of these particular games was looking at the time. So you would definitely want to figure that out. But nonetheless, you know, not to crap on their seat. Like, again, compared to what it was in, the last few years under Justin Fields, and then last season, obviously rookie season for Caleb Williams. It is looking great right now. The future is potentially bright. And how they handle this offseason is going to either break the mold in terms of Bears regular seasons over the past few years to potentially set them into the future and reach that point in a more positive, more commanding way, or completely falter and completely bungle everything in the same way that, as was referenced as well as I was watching this, the Commanders did. Now, again, injuries were a heavy factor for them, and they could be a heavy factor for any team. But it's just something to watch for. Colson Loveland, would have 4 receptions for 56 yards. And DJ Moore would have 5 receptions for 52 yards and a touchdown. It's just tough, too, because they played their hearts out. Especially when you look at Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker. Of course, everybody deserves their credit. But Brisker, man, in this game, had 14 tackles, 8 solo tackles, a sack, a tackle for loss, and 2 pass deflections. The man was flying all over the place and making plays. He even got himself in a scenario where on a different pass intended for Puka Nacua, he's running straw for straw with him, and he gets in position to knock the ball down. And I'm like, you're not expecting that from a safety matched up on Puka Nacua. But he made it happen. That was the influence he had in this game. And it just didn't pay off. Same for Kyler Gordon, who would have himself 7 tackles, 3 solo, and a sack and a TFL in this game as well. Just a tremendous effort from those guys. They forced 4 sacks overall. They had 6 tackles for loss and 7 pass deflections. But it would not be enough in this scenario. And I mean, hey, that would do it for all the game action as we prepare for the damn conference championship games on Sunday, both of them, with the New England Patriots taking on the Denver Broncos first, and then the Los Angeles Rams taking on my Seattle Seahawks in Lumen. It could get extremely crazy. But we will see what happens then. There were a lot of other developments to get into in regards to everything surrounding the divisional round, and even some things that have broken into the mainframe after this. However, this is already a 3-hour video, so I will chop it up. I guess I always had to take that into account, but I will chop it up and I will cover all of the particular developments in my next video on NFL coverage, aside from the recent firing of Sean McDermott, because I already put that in tandem with the coverage of the Broncos and Bills game. I also talked about the Brandon Beane one there, so those two aren't really going to matter for my video there. Same with Zach Charbonnet's injury as well. I already mentioned that in the flow of the Seahawks game. But the other ones, with some hirings and some more firings, will be detailed in that aspect of the second part of the recap. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.